Oh,
Oh, welcome back to PodsDAO Pod, everyone. We're back again for episode 3, and we're gonna discuss amongst ourselves. We're gonna build in public again, build this PodsDAO with the Pods Pod. So thanks for joining us again. If you're listening in, if you're following on Spotify or iTunes or YouTube or this live stream, thanks for joining again. We're going to get straight into business. Everyone's here and ready to go. So let's crack on as we usually do with segment what we like to call the 20%. The 20% wins, the easy wins that we got done in the last week, and look forward to the next week. So, what did we get done this week? What's the progress within PodsDAO? We uh, are getting close with some more socials. Eve's set up Lens. We have to wait on a waiting list for Lens. We're up on Instagram and we're up on TikTok, so check those out. We'll be getting some of our clips out on those and doing some more promotion. GitHub, we're still waiting on some last confirmations to get on the logins for that. We have Jonathan's making progress with Mirror XYZ to get some transcriptions up there and get the pod up and do some blogs on the pod. We had another podcast reach out to us on Twitter. I'm just going to find out the name of it now. Bear with me 1 second. Golden Age Advocacy Pod. So just another one. Maybe some people have heard of that. So it's quite a solar punky kind of pod by the looks of it. What else did we get done this week? Oh, I'm not sure if we got it done, but maybe we can ask. John, did you said last week, I think you wanted to look into Cool Zone Media and some other. Did you venture into those fields at all,
I've never heard of
or
Cool Zone Media. I was talking about more like the
oh, maybe
ham
there's another
radio
one.
stations and all that type of stuff. So I'm just looking at Cool Zone
That's the
Media
one.
right now. Looks
Maybe that
pretty
was
interesting.
Jonathan to mention that one. What did you learn from Ham? Was it Ham Radio then? What did you learn from those guys?
Well, I mean, it's a bunch of cranky old men for the most part, but a lot of it
Yeah.
is people who are just super interested into the tech and have like other jobs and or retired and just kind of just doing it for
That's what
fun.
we're all here for,
Yeah.
isn't it? For fun
Yeah,
and
I
for
mean,
passion.
yeah, if
Yeah.
it's not fun, why do it? But you guys
Mm.
definitely seem like you're more on the track of wanting to turn that into something that we could all quit our day jobs from eventually. But
Well, yeah. Hopefully, those two things aren't mutually exclusive. That we can have a bit of fun with it and make some,
yeah.
make it an enterprise as well. So I think maybe that's a project for ongoing. Look into Cool Zone Media, Rug Radio, and the rest of them, and find out what they do right and what they do wrong.
Well, I
So
know
maybe
not too many people in the Web3 space are actually making a living from podcasting. Unless they're like
no.
YouTube people, like BitBoy and Bankless guys.
Yeah, I found out something quite interesting this week, though. That CoffeeZilla just did an episode actually the other day on podcasters that have been scammed. And yeah, he was it's big. Some if you've heard of Theo Vaughn,
Yeah, yeah.
the comedian.
He's
Yeah,
notorious. Yeah, he's infamous. And there's a lot of like podcasters and YouTubers that get I mean, I've been offered, tokens to shill, some project or another, or referral link type of things that, podcasters and YouTubers get caught up in a lot of times. And then the referral link, they say, we're not affiliated, but go ahead and, click the referral link and help support the station. But then it turns out to be like a scam as well,
total
so
scam.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Well,
get
well,
you.
these. Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just saying, I get like Twitter messages and emails all the time from stuff like that. Asking me to just shill this or that, and I'm just like,
That,
nah.
that's one of the things we're afraid of, isn't it? With putting out our data publicly about who's in PodsDAO, because we're worried that if we do a public link, all the
Yeah.
shillers and the scammers out there, I'll just go DM every one of our pods. Can I come on your show? Do my token? You know.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Coffeezilla in his episode was saying that Theo Vaughn and other smaller podcasters in that orbit are making around 4 million a year from podcasting, just running ads and all the rest of it. So, and subscriptions and whatnot. So, there's definitely something there. And of course, Rogan
Oh,
is
Theo Vaughn. Yeah,
Rogan's
now I
working.
know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, you
So,
know,
yeah.
the comedian
I was
guy.
crossing him with some other guy, like in the crypto space.
Yeah. Yeah, so here's what I find interesting. Those guys are making millions. CoffeeZilla's making, what did he say? 9 grand a month. So the YouTuber's making less than the podcaster's the point there. Anyway, we digress. Clinomedic, what's your thoughts on the directory and reaching out to some people? What do you think's the best way we can do that in the coming week? The coming weeks.
I
Some
share
next
your
easy steps.
I share your concern about like listing. If we list any contact information or handles or anything, then we could get spammers that just spam something out to the whole list of the people there. That's happened in another DAO. But I think we could perhaps do it just like listing links to their YouTube, their Apple Podcasts, stuff that isn't like contact information per se. And then so all that stuff would just be public information anyway. We can list just the ones that are in the network, in the PodsDAO network, and then we can also have that application form as well. And then all of us would be able to see the people that are applying, and then we'd be able to implement whatever kind of decision-making process is necessary to approve them and add them to that list. I think that's an easy way to start growing this. And then I'm also curious eventually to see if there's any way to go about this in more of an on-chain way so that we're not just depending on Google Sheets and Google Forms, as easy as those are.
It would be much easier on everyone, wouldn't it? But that's cool that we're making, because I think that is going to be so crucial for all the little podcasters out there, or not, I keep using the word little, but all the ones that aren't huge, basically, to reach out and puffle their heads up and see what we're doing, because it's hard for us to track them all down. So I think raising some awareness that we're about, like this last one I mentioned, who got in touch with us this week, they just found our Twitter and they were like, add me in, you know. So the more we can do that, I think it's gonna be easier for us. I also think this week some easy wins might be create some memes about what, try and get some messages out through memes. That can spread the message pretty well. What else have I got here? Eves, have you got anything? I think I need to have a chat with Peth. Or we need to engage Peth as a DAO to see what the situation is with the pods in metagame. See if there's any sort of route in where they can join PodsDAO. We'll have to see. I think that's the. Yeah.
I was going to say the accumulated clip. I'm going to, try and I guess lead that one, because I'll be. Well, I don't have to put it together, but I figured I would put it together because I'm already doing some clips. So why not, just do the thing. So yeah, that's definitely something that I think, as you said, next sort of 2 to 3 weeks, very doable. Just needs sort of like a I guess a centralized place where to manage it from, as in, where to send everyone's like clips that they want to be included, rather than, people posting them all over in different places. I just need to kind of figure out some way to get them all consolidated, basically, to make it simple, so people don't get left out as well.
So get them to send it to the PodsDAO email or something, like just as a ready-made clip that they've chosen that they want in. And we can maybe get some messaging out there about how like we're gonna coordinate that to get as many views on that as possible, kind of as a first go at it.
Well, I'd be interested, just quickly, I'd be interested to hear what Clinomedic's thoughts are on that, in terms of because the idea is obviously like crowdsourcing, and I guess we've discussed like different sort of like economics and things in the chat. So, and I think like crowdsourcing in some ways like a very sort of like open and sort of equal model. It's a way to collaborate. That's it's like a collective kind of idea. So I guess what do you think? Have you ever crowdsourced any information or like clips like this, or like what do you think about the idea?
I've only done that for newsletters, like for PubDAO for a while. I did a couple editions of this like writing in Web3 newsletter, and I would get like other little sections written by people in the PubDAO community, or they would share a link to their article, and I would include that in like a featured articles section. But I definitely think that it makes sense, especially if we can incent if it adds enough value that.
I think we lost Clinomenic for a sec there. He's
Oh,
come back. He's back.
can you hear me?
Oh,
Yeah, we can
he's
hear you
back.
now.
You're
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
You're back. Go on.
I think something like this, if it adds enough value and people are eventually, if it adds enough value, people would be incentivized to like cut their own clips, at least close enough, and then maybe there would just need to be some retouching done to stitch them all together. But I definitely like that idea.
So what I guess maybe more importantly, what did you learn from your experience? As in, like, how I mentioned the sort of centralized place to get them all. Like, you can imagine if you're doing something like maybe you're talking to people on Discord and Twitter, and they're sending you links here and there. So I imagine you maybe ran into some similar things. What's the kind of what did you learn from that? Like, what would be helpful to like, have you got any nuggets that would be helpful for making this clip?
I mean, you're definitely right about there should be some kind of designated channel where people can leave the stuff so that you or anyone else helping to make this best of clip or reel doesn't have to scour all these different channels. But also beyond that, just making it lightweight. I mean, granted, what I did was different in that people would mainly be sharing links to things that they've already written, or maybe there were a couple times when someone wrote a small little 300 400 word thought piece about something, and I would include it in. But for the most part, it was just as simple as sharing a link. In this case, we would either be asking them to share a clip, or we would be asking their permission to edit a clip out of some podcast that they have already released. But I mean, I think eventually it would be great if they were incentivized to do it themselves. But maybe until then, PodsDAO would be the one doing it, or whoever would want to put the reel together would do that. But I definitely think you're right. Having it in one kind of designated channel, people can talk about this and share their clips and whatnot. That makes sense to me.
Cool, yeah. Maybe we do a pop-up Telegram channel or something like that can just be, well, could it even stay there, and that way people can post the clips and the links to there, but they can also have discussion about, hey, why don't we, add a timestamp or this or a slide thing intermediate, slide in between them, or people could have their own ideas. We could refine the process. It's an ongoing thing. If we make a channel, it's like sort of psychologically, people come in Telegram, they see it, oh, it's there. What's going on in there. Oh, straight away, boom. Oh, these guys make compilation clips, sick. Any new members, it's sort of immediately obvious to them. They can be part of the process. It keeps rolling. So yeah, maybe we just make a channel for it. What I mean? Maybe, I don't know. What do you guys think about
that? Do we know how many of the podcasts in the network are already in the habit of cutting clips, like a couple minute clips of episodes?
That's why
good question.
That's why I was thinking when I put that poll out, do you do audio and audio video? I think we only got a few responses, but it's a good question. But I think even if it's 3 or 4 or 5 that do video clips,
still enough.
It's still enough for now, I guess. But it is a good question because I think most people will still be on audio.
I mean, what's the great risk of doing like a public shout out on Twitter or something? So I'm not just saying to anyone and send you clips, but podcasters, right? We check the clips. Maybe maybe it's an opportunity because people see that as an opportunity for them. It's an opportunity for us to get new members. If we're like, you know what I mean? If you're like, oh, this guy was fucking good. This guy's a good guy, a good host. You know what I mean? Let's get him in. Send in the link. You know what I mean? So maybe we do a shout out on Twitter.
That's a super good idea. That's a really good idea. What I was gonna say is mediocre compared to that idea. I was gonna say, like, even within the DAO, like if you have some folks who are still on audio, what we can do is get them to send up their audio timestamp, and then we just chuck up a visual of their pod. It's like some shitty intermediary thing, so it's not just video then audio, it's still a visual, and that way they get in and and maybe we just cut it in a way where their audio is slightly less than the video. But you know, if we've only two or three pods that do video, only want to make a 5-minute clip, you know, we could throw in a couple of just audios with the visual of the pod logo over it, you know, so that's still something for the consumer to look at, you know. Would still play.
Would it
But
help
yours,
in that
yours
case?
is a better idea.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I like that idea if I understand correctly. And so you're saying there would be like an image kind of placeholder for the podcasts that don't have video content. Like I'd be happy to have design thumbnail stuff there.
Maybe a little squiggly, you know, the squiggly line that goes across with the sound thing.
Oh yeah, okay. Oh, perfect.
I think
that's even better.
Because then maybe that's an incentive. People, if that podcaster who hasn't got the video clips together yet sees the accumulated video, it's like, I should get my shit together and make video because the video clips are pretty cool. I should get there myself, you know. So I mean, it's all a process, isn't it? We're not all going to be perfect and there immediately. It's all like incentives to get people to move towards this. But you're right, that I love that idea of reaching out to other pods and just go, hey, we're putting out this accumulated clip, you want to be in it? Send us your clip, and if it makes the cut, you know, if it's not horrible content or whatever, like, we'll put it in. Good idea.
Maybe we prioritize PodsDAO people, but that's why, like, because you said like make the cut, and I'm not expecting like a mad, you know, flurry of like people sending stuff in, but let's just say there was like, you know, 20 people, right? Like maybe the clip makes the clip too long, and there's, you know, like 10 PodsDAO people, for example. Then we got 30, so it's like we'd maybe prioritize, right? For now, we prioritize the PodsDAO people, and then, you know, the other things like you said, sort of like a bit of a competition, whoever's like got the best one or the one that we like, or not even just best in terms of like production, you know, they might just be saying something cool, or we enjoyed the energy, or we could even just vote on it. We could just, again, if we're using the Telegram channel, the clips can be posted in there. PodsDAO votes on, that guy's clip's the best. We'll just vote. It's simple, thumbs up or whatever, or do a poll.
Well, that's not exactly that. It's going to be wasted content. We can always use the ones that we don't use.
Oh, yeah. True, exactly, yeah.
It's not just one accumulated clip and then we're walking away from this idea, you know what I mean? So it's always going to be there. We should, though, like, put out some sort of, two things, actually. We should make some sort of stipulation that, like, don't be sending us a 5-minute clip. Do you know what I mean? Because, like, it should be, like, send us a 60-second clip max. Because if everyone chucks in 5 minutes, 4 minutes here, it's going to be a half-hour clip. Do you know what I mean? So probably we should say, look, you'll only make the cut if it's 60 seconds max. The other thing is, like, we'd probably get more of a response if we put it out that we are willing to put in pods that aren't just crypto pods. Like, if we've settled on the idea that we're going to include pods that, and this is one of the things that we have to discuss today, like, if we're open to the idea of getting in crypto adjacent pods and pods that are like into some of the other ideas that we like or whatever, but aren't yet thinking about crypto, I mean, that could open the book to more people. That's all I'm saying. Send it in.
I mean, I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to the idea, but at the same time, I always liked the idea of pushing forward the crypto message and then crypto values and like the sort of benefits. Being advocates of crypto. I mean, as a DAO, we are in crypto. A DAO is a crypto organization. Doesn't mean that you can't help people that aren't in crypto and vice versa. But yeah, I guess I like the idea of it being like a pillar that we're crypto. You know, that's I mean, we're all crypto pod. I'm not saying, again, there could be benefits, could be a downside to doing it that way. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
So that's actually the first question we have in the next segment. So should I the Pornhub music? All right, let me see if I can do this.
Just really quick, you mentioned you mentioned you're trying to get on Lens.
Yeah.
I just checked mine. I got a bunch of invites somehow. So if you share some wallet address, I can send it, and you can make a handle for PodsDAO.
Oh, nice. Okay. Sick.
Yeah, Yves, you know about that more than me. Why is it that you have to wait on a waiting list? Do they sort of check your Twitter profile, see if you're a player, and if you're not a player, then you're bottom of the list? If you are a player, they'll prioritize you. That's pretty cynical, but
I mean, maybe it kind of seems like so far. It kind of seems like they're inviting people in kind of manually, like how Farcaster is doing it. I don't know if it's just like an early stage approach. or they don't want a bunch of like bot accounts or something coming in.
Yeah, I mean, not just. I mean, this probably could be a long conversation, but hasn't Lens been around for like a year at least, bare minimum, at least? So yeah, I'm just wondering like how long is that invite thing? I mean, I'm not that. I don't know. I know it's Arve, it's Stani. What's his? I can't say Kolkachev, some Stani something. But he's Stani. You know, he's pretty. Seems like a pretty cool guy. And yeah, it's an Arve product, right? Or you know, an Arve platform. You know, Arve's always been good to the crypto ecosystem. You know, it's like it's kind of hard, one of those. It's maybe hard to hate on. You know what I mean? It's not like Arve's the best thing ever, but it's also not like they've really done. They've been very consistent. You don't see a bunch of hacks involved around anything or any like scamness or anything. They seem to be like quite. I don't know, quite straightforward, and you see what you get. At least that last time I checked in on them, that was kind of the vibe I got from them. But yeah, on that note, is everyone happy to move on?
On that note, Ave, if you're listening,
yeah.
sponsor you to sponsor.
Yeah, we love you, dude. We love Arve. We fucking love Arve's the best thing ever.
We're gonna clip that right up there, and we're gonna put that at the front of the accumulated clip. get that out to some Ave, Ave folks. And on that note, hence the Pornhub music, and we'll move on. Okay, so let's bounce into the 80%, folks, which is where we look at not the easy wins, but the more long-term difficult stuff for PodsDAO and the sort of deeper foundation value stuff and things that we need to think about. So on the last segment, Yves was talking about this question of whether PodsDAO is open to non-specifically crypto pods. This has been a big debate ongoing within our DAO Telegram. People have varying different views. Rather than me give my view, because that's boring, let's go to Klinemenic and John, and then we'll drop back to Yves for his point of view. So let's go to John, then Klinemenic, just to balance it up. John, what do you think? Do you think we should just stick with crypto pods, or is there a wider opportunity here to bring in other pods that are in this space that are interested in crypto, but or not thinking about crypto yet, but could be thinking about crypto?
Well, it's PodsDAO, so that does kind of imply Web3 and crypto. Is crypto Web3 and vice versa? Is Web3 all crypto, or are there a lot of other things involved in Web3 that might not necessarily be crypto? And you know, there's crypto seems to imply more speculation and financial application. Web3 seems to imply, you know, decentralized ID, decentralized social media, decentralized this and that. So maybe you could find other innovative podcasts that are more focused on the innovation of certain of these Web3 sectors.
So I think just to clarify, I mean, unless I'm drastically wrong, whenever we say crypto, it's almost like a word that we use, but we mean Web3. So everything that you mentioned, everything that's blockchain related, so is already in. But I guess isn't AI now Web3 tech? Do we include pods that are AI? Is there other futuristic tech? Is there other non-tech related pods? I don't know. Pods out there that are focused on grassroots democracy, collective economy, individual sovereignty in other ways. Do we close the door on them when we're all trying in this world of Web3 to encourage those guys to think about blockchain? Why would we shut the door? What do you think? Klinemenic, let's go to you, and then we'll bounce back to Yves.
I mean, I think it makes sense to focus on podcasts that are already either about some Web3 topic or already incorporate Web3 technology into their business model. Or if a podcast doesn't fit in either of those two categories, but they're curious about it, then they can maybe join the network and we can essentially coach them into getting involved in this, or work with other podcasts that are and learn from everyone else. Everyone else is doing it. And I think that kind of also ties into mission alignment as well, because it shows that we, at least like to me, the emphasis around Web3 here is sort of around financial sovereignty. But like we're not just a bunch of rugged individualists. There's also this kind of collectivism here happening that PodsDAO is trying to foster. So like financially sovereign podcast teams that see value in working as a collective. But the Web3, I think, is what enables that kind of sovereignty, where they aren't as dependent on platforms. Granted, I think we're still pretty early in working towards a creator economy where you really don't have to depend on any platforms. Stuff like Lens and donating directly to podcasts like this on chain. I think as that increases, these podcasts can become a bit more financially autonomous. And I think that's like a substantial thing that I think this collective can work towards.
Yeah, definitely. Eves, what do you think?
I have a couple things to say. So the first one is, okay. The Web3 one. I like what John said in essence, and this is just sort of maybe being picky, or maybe something to think about. Maybe there's some truth in it. I don't know. The term Web3 to me feels a bit like a marketing term. It feels like it's kind of snuck in from the VCs. Kind of like, how Google are like pro everything and pro human and pro diversity, but they're also like $1 billion surveillance capitalists. You know what I mean? Like it's surveillance capitalists. They steal all our data and make billions of dollars off it. But like, yeah, no, we love humans. Humans are great. So, and I'm not saying I'm not saying fundamentally that's not the point. The point was actually a really good one that I liked, and it made me think, John, about like, for example, like an ASIC podcast. Just as the first example came to me, like a Bitcoin 8. That's not necessarily crypto, but it's a bit. Where does it stop? Right, there's a bunch of hardware involved. It's not just like information, like bits on the computer. It's not just code and stuff. Like there's also the infrastructure. There's like, how are people running the nodes? What do we want to do? Like Ethereum validator podcasts, like those guys. Like there's so many things. And that all
that's all crypto related or crypto adjacent. Why would we not include those?
No, I agree. No, that's what I was. But also that was to Clinomenic's point about like, it's also not just like the financial side. I mean, that's another cool thing about crypto in general. And I've got, to be honest, why I think like trying to push like a crypto message and crypto values is actually really beneficial, because as Clinomenic said, it isn't just financial. The thing I've always liked is like the fact that we're doing governance experiments, right? And like, you look at the traditional systems and, there's like these slow bureaucratic attempts to do certain things. But when you actually look at like the rapid pace and growth and acceleration, expansion of the governance space in crypto compared to, let's just say, your local national government, how radical a change it is and how much experimentation is actually done in terms, like the political side, the governance side of these DAOs and things, and just crypto in general, how different smart contracts interact, how how tokens are distributed, we're talking about monetary policy, rapid innovations. And so I think like, why not go full steam ahead on that kind of stuff? Because that's, I don't know, we're actually trying to create new systems here. I think that's like extremely powerful thing about crypto and the powerful idea that we're playing with. And yeah, not saying there aren't other cool podcasters and reasons to bring them in. But I don't know, at least personally, I think we have a potential, we have a chance, right, to really like change the world. And if you're interested in like politics or social change or systemic change, it seems almost obvious like crypto is the thing that's like has a chance of like creating some real change, as people say.
So Eves, let me ask you this, because just in the interest of the next question, which is kind of related, let me ask you this: who would you not include in PodsDAO? Who is not included at the minute in PodsDAO?
I mean, I suppose I know what you mean, but to answer that, at the minute, no one, right? Like we just reached out. I mean, we sort of already started with like targeting, crypto podcasters. So that's kind of like already who has been brought in, not exactly like allowed or permitted or whatever. We just invite them. I would say, I mean, if they're anti-crypto, right, then that kind of defeats the whole thing that I was just saying before. So I guess I can't like that would I guess in when I do the math, it's like, well, I can't. That'd be a contradictory kind of logic there if I was like, oh, I'm okay with like anti-crypto people, but I think one of the things pillars should be like pro-crypto. That wouldn't make any sense. So just based on that basis, I have to say that probably no anti-crypto people.
Just no anti-crypto, anti-blockchain, anti-web. These terms we all.
Yeah, no, that we can't talk to. We can have yeah, it's not like that kind. Yeah, but definitely not. Like, oh, we're only crypto and we don't talk. Not like perfectly. In fact, I would love to have a critique of crypto on the podcast, on here, on my podcast, wherever. Like, I think that's healthy. So, definitely not like that kind of like censoring or like not permitting them to join in any way. That I think actually could be kind of cool if we had a crypto critic or a DAO critic on that kind of thing as a guest. Like, see no reason to do that, but yeah, take part in but like, why take part in operation? At least not take part in the operations, because it's like they're antithetical to the goal, I suppose. Like, it's almost like you're purposely throwing a spanner in the a spanner in the works kind of thing, if that makes sense. Maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. I don't know.
Okay, cool. All right. So it seems like we're a pretty broad church, along the lines of the general broad sort of mission, and open to everyone who's not massively toxically anti-crypto, but maybe getting a few in that are like sensibly critical.
Yeah, also toxically pro-crypto. So like, no fucking, what was I gonna say? What's the XRP? Like, people, you ever met those guys that are just always like they're always holding on. They're holding on to the lawsuit thing, and they're just like, they sound like a pastor when you talk to them, and they're like, no, trust me, XRP, man, it's the fucking JP Morgan got in. Honestly, dude, it's gonna be the thing you don't understand. And it's like, there's a couple of those. There was Luna that had that kind of weird vibe. Obviously, Bitcoin's kind of got its own kind of thing where there's a bit of a religious thing going on.
So you're saying you wouldn't want the bearable bull to join the network?
Who's the bearable bull? I've never heard that before.
Man.
The bearable or unbearable?
He's like a XRP maxi for years now. And he's got this distinct voice in his podcast. You know who I'm talking about, right, Spencer?
No, but I feel like how you're describing it, I'm sure I get it right away.
Man, yeah, I guess I'm giving him kind of a indirect shout out.
Bearable bear? What is it?
Bearable bull.
Bearable bull. Okay.
Yeah, no publicity is bad publicity. Right?
But I have to. In my early days, I listened to him, and I have to admit, I've learned a lot about cryptography and early type of stuff through him in some of his earlier episodes.
Dude, that's the thing. There's good XRP people, I'm sure, but there's just there's certain people. Like, I've got friends who don't even know anything about crypto, and they know a guy. They know a guy that's one of these crypto. That's the only thing they know about crypto. Like, I remember I literally spoke to a friend, and he was like, "You ever heard of this XRP?" And I was like, "No, bro. What have you heard this?" And he was like, "Well, I met this guy, and he like wouldn't stop talking about it." And I was like, "Dude, it's one of those XRP as if you fucking
XRP army, man."
Yeah,
and the Chainlink Marines,
So I guess like maybe no. Look, if you're really into something, it's like hard to determine whether they're like a shill or like it's a fine line. But I don't know. I guess I would think sorry, go on.
So the question might just be, maybe when it comes to specific projects, and financial projects specifically, like, are they just set up to talk about number go up, or is there a use case there that can be legit? And are they even if there is that, are they just turning the finger up at all of everything else that's Web3? Are they more open-minded? They're respectful, civil, even if they are maybe in their corner going, I'm not too sure about Web3, but I am for I'm massively for Bitcoin or whatever. They're at least maybe respectful.
Yeah.
They're not going to disturb the cohesion of everyone. Do you know what I mean? Maybe and they're a cool character. They fit in. Maybe there's a space in PodsDAO for people like that, you know? Anyway, well, let's move on to the next topic, next question. So let's cue some more music. Right, here's the big one. Or one of. Who, and this is going to get some people's backs up, who in PodsDAO, hosts or non-host contributors, if we're going with a federated model and a minimal viable PodsDAO, decentralized as possible, Clinominic, you mentioned that in the last episode, how do we do this? And we're going to get into that question in a minute, but leading on from this, if we try and do this with as little centralization, core team, blah, 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 it almost feels like you have to have some nodes along the way that are taking some responsibility to get their content uploaded to the network, then the network effects go. So here's my question. A lot of independent podcasters are usually the host that gets up off their couch and goes, right, I'm going to create some content. And they bring in a producer if they're able. They bring in a social media person if they're able. Oftentimes they're not able. But it's this side of the debate where people say, look, the podcast wouldn't exist if the host didn't get up out of the couch and go, I'm creating some content today. I'm putting a little bit of my money into getting the equipment. If the podcast host walks away, the podcast is done. So from that side of the debate, do you agree? I'll go to John first. And if that is the truth, how do we build a federated, decentralized PodsDAO where the pod host isn't sort of central to their little node? You know, if they get paid the same as their producer, would that upset the host? Is there a way to do that that's fair and still have more governance rights but less pay for the contributor? Do you see what I'm getting at? Not to go on and on about it. How do you see that, John, as someone who is a host and a producer? How do you see that dynamic?
I mean, I see that happening right now in Crypto Sapiens. You know, it's like I'm not a host of any of those shows, and I feel just as central to the project as the host. And Humpty, he actually doesn't run the main show anymore. Rachel Rose does. And, you know, I'm on the back end of all three shows on there right now. And yeah, no, I don't think anything would get done if I didn't do my part in that. So yeah.
So
but
would you say, sorry to interrupt you, would you just say, because I think that's the distinction, because Jonathan made this point as well. He was like, if there's a wider sort of network going on, you know, Crypto Sapiens, Cointelegraph, ReFi DAO, Metagame, the podcasters are all kind of, you know, part of that. But if you're just a dude in Brooklyn with your mic, a dude in India, you know, you're not part of anything else. Is it only you? And
just an individual project.
You're behind the steering wheel. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, it's just like an individual project, just like anything else. You know, you have one person making something. Yeah, of course the host is the most important because they're the only one working on the project. So, but in the Journo DAO, which I'm in with Spencer, and we only have 2 episodes out right now on our Press Fix podcast. But I mean, the table's open for any of us, of like the 6 of us core members, to just go in there and fire it up and make an episode at any point, you know. And I think Spencer knows that, you know, and everybody in there knows that if they have an idea, they can just go in there and fire up the StreamYard account and do whatever they want with it.
So let's go to Clinominic and we'll go to Eves. Like if PodsDAO's makeup is maybe, I don't know, 80% of people who are like just the little dude steering the wheel. And maybe 20% is folks that are connected to PodsDAO, but are also part of Crypto Sapiens as well, or ReFi DAO as well. How do we build a model, a governance model, a revenue model, a rewards model, compensatory model, with knowing that we have to keep cohesion, and yet people are going to see it differently based on those two things? How would you think about that, Clint and Minnick?
I mean, I'd be inclined to take kind of like a states' rights approach here, where like we just let the podcasts themselves choose to organize their payment structures and their internal, budgeting and everything, and how they split up funds. We let all the podcasts as teams decide on their own terms, and then we can just give each podcast some kind of wallet within, or just have some kind of designated wallet for each podcast, and that's how we can split up revenue. And then we just send all those funds to the podcast directly, and we don't need to be micromanaging how they split up those funds necessarily. It's like one idea here. I posted in the comments. I was actually looking through ENS. PodsDAO.eth is available. So what we could do is we get PodsDAO.eth, and we can do subdomains. So like fiatlux.podsdao.eth, blockchain solidarity pod or some shorthand .podsdao.eth. And then when PodsDAO gets some kind of donation, or say PodsDAO gets a grant of $2,000 and there's 20 podcasts in this, they all can get $100, something like that. I think that's a relatively streamlined way to do it, and it won't involve us imposing any rules on these podcasts for how to split up those funds and how to use them. Yeah, right. Mercurial, yeah. I was just thinking about that.
Is there a comment from Rather Mercurial? I'm not following the private chat, so maybe someone can. Eves, maybe you want to read it out?
I was thinking this before. I was actually not going to mention his comment because I thought about that, and I thought I don't need to prompt anyone even more. But PodsDAO ETH is available, and I said too late because we're live. So, I don't think anyone's watching. So,
I don't think anyone's going to take it. Right, so let me ask, because this is kind of the next where we're going with the whole minimal viable. What we've kind of been like thinking about behind the scenes a little bit. We wanted to bring onto the pod to discuss it together. Is the idea that kind of sparked from Clean and Minix? I wonder how you could do this with as little overheads, governance as possible. Rather, Mercurial's been driving at that as well. I think we'd all kind of like. I can imagine podcasters just want to get on with creating content and not worry about too much overhead, being told what to do. I think we're all kind of angling at more decentralization. So Clean and Minnick just mentioned how a states' rights model would work. If there's a grant, it goes down to the wallets, seemingly probably equal terms for everyone. Here's my question. How do we think about how that system of rewards would work in a decentralized model if we are to be successful? Let's see if we are to be successful with the clips to ad strategy, right? Because I think then, unless we're still going down the route of everyone gets the same amount of money, which is maybe more communist than we'd want, do you have to build incentives where you still have the little nodes of the pods, and so the core team isn't going, hey, we need you to tweet that to build the network effects, tweet it, but maybe there's an incentive there where if you're a producer or the host or anyone, we can build in rewards based on if you like something. If you get up in the morning, go on your Twitter and you like 10 times clips of what PodsDAO has put out in the last week, that's building network effects. Can you individually, not even down to your pod node, can you get a wallet where you do the activity, you're incentivized to do it because you know the rewards are going to click down to you, right? And that's just for like sort of these kind of network effects thing. What if maybe for something like if a producer produces a clip, produces the pod, that is somehow linked in to the host as the kind of CEO of the node, and then they put the content up, and then the ad money for the content comes down to the pod, right? Do you know what I mean? Because that's a bit more complicated to sort out. The pod CEO, the host, or whatever has to decide, all right, how then do I allocate this money? But it seems like if we want to build the network effects, and we all know a tweet, a retweet, a blog, anyone can do it. A Twitter Spaces, we kind of want to encourage as many people to just get going at that. I feel like if I knew I was going to get paid to do that, I'd be right retweeting, liking, knowing that rewards are just flooding into my individual wallet. So if this is the way we want to build it, nobody from a core team is telling contributors what they should and shouldn't do. It's all up to them, and they're incentivized to do it because the money's flowing in. How do we think about that model based on what Clinomedic just said? Can we have all in sunder? The grants come in, Clinomedic said, the content goes out, the pod CEO splits it, and then more direct kind of revenues coming in. Can we have all? Can we have it all? And if not, why not? Let's go to Clinomedic, then we'll go to Eves on that one.
I think we can kind of have it both ways here. I think we can give each podcast some kind of designated podcast wallet, and that's how we can split up grants, however we choose to do that. And then individuals, if they want to contribute to PodsDAO in some collective effort beyond just contributing to their particular podcast, then I think they can get compensated as well as individuals. But I'd be inclined to think that PodsDAO, like we don't need to get into PodsDAO incentivizing individuals to contribute to their podcast. I mean, that seems like a ton of administrative work. If we can just reward the podcast as a whole and let them manage it however they're used to managing funds. And then if any of those individuals also want to contribute to the collective efforts, then I think they'd be eligible for compensation from some PodsDAO treasury or something like that. Just my thoughts.
That seems like a nice middle ground, so that we're not building too much technical code or too much administrative overburden as to who did what, who liked what.
Yeah.
It just that comes down to the pod immediately rather than the core team of PodsDAO sorting it out. But it seems to me like, what do you think? Just the last question I'll go to you. What do you think is more important if you're a contributor to John's Eureka Street podcast, right? Say he has got a social media guy. Do you think it's more worthwhile than the network effects of PodsDAO as a whole, that Eureka John's social media guy retweets their own podcast and just focuses on, well, let's just retweet our own, like we're doing our little bit for our pod within the collective? Or do you think the rewards and incentives should be 3x, 4x if they tweet somebody else's? Do you know what I mean? Because if we're saying, like, if we end up just incentivizing everyone just to tweet their own stuff, blog on their own stuff, create content on their own stuff, not collab with others in the network effects are minimized. So it's almost like you have to really financially, almost, and not just financially, there's other ways to reward people, but really reward people. Hey, tweet your own stuff, you'll get this. But if you do a collab over with that pod, if you retweet their content, money, and that encourages the big guys to retweet others, like, because they might be going, why the fuck would I tweet the little guys? Hey, well, it's 5x worth your value, you know what I mean? Like, you do that for your own, or you can do it for 5x over here. So yeah, I don't know, like, that doesn't contradict at all what you said. Like, it's not a point against you at all. It's just, I don't know. So I don't know why I mentioned it. It's just in my head, but it's we have to kind of build them in, but it can still come down to the CEO, I guess, of Eves. What do you think of all of this? How do you see us building this?
I mean, I think, I guess my first thought on the sort of, when you mentioned like a sort of alluded to like a communist model, I wouldn't, right off the bat, I wouldn't think that we can't do a bunch of different things. But then I also think, splitting everything equally, how does that work in terms of, I suppose you could say like a tax to the DAO, right? As in, do people just rush in because we're distributing it equally, and then it dilutes it so that it's so little because everyone's trying to grab their piece, that the people that are actually podcasting and really trying hard get nothing. And I mean, everyone gets nothing in that situation, I guess, because it's spread so thinly across everyone. But that is in the case of an attack, right? That's or calling it an attack, but I think you get the point. So that was one of my thoughts, and I think on the sort of like reward thing, the to incentivize people to collaborate. On paper, in theory, it's like sounds like a cool idea. So I'm not like against it. I maybe something maybe in like it's a tough one, right? Because in some sense, I think why do we need to incentivize people to fucking work together? Like, is that like the point we're at? Like, in some sense, it's kind of like a disgust there, like a feeling of like, oh, that's kind of, I don't know why it's weird. Like, it seems healthy because you're incentivizing people to collaborate. And so that's in like a flip on the like selfish, get my money, It's like sort of co-opting that kind of natural incentive to make money and then injecting like a different mechanism or motivation or ulterior different motive behind it. But yeah, so I don't know, like, but at the same time, like, I'm not, actually disgusted by the idea. It's just like a weird feeling there. But I think, why not do it? Like, I guess it is also, you could argue like it's a good thing to like I said, flip the model, right? Instead of it being sort of like selfish, do it like you actually get rewarded more to collaborate. This is the benefit of working with other people. Like, you benefit from that.
Oh, flip it on, turn it around the other way. If we're saying that the our whole model, or if this works, right? If this works and works well, let's see if it does. But if it does, then the ad revenue is going to come in the most to clips that get seen the most, and therefore that get around the network the most. So if that's going to be the end product, if that's what's going to result in collaboration, then everyone's working towards that anyway. And it would be like, you can't, that's the golden goose. The golden goose has to be spread fairly. Do you know what I mean? And to people who do partake in the golden goose, do you know what I mean? So it's not like, if like it has to be, you have to then split it out to people who have made that golden goose happen in that way. And the only way it does get it that I can see is the most mixed and the most random collaborations across the system. Do you know what I mean? Will result in the most views or from the most videos. The more collaborations, the more shares, the more retweets across the network results in more folks seeing it, more corners of this sector seeing that sector, overlap, growth. That's really how you grow here, like different sectors in this crypto space seeing the potential and interest and finding an interest in another part of the space. I mean, that's what Lens would care about. That's what any really protocol that's looking for growth. They have their market, but they're looking for other people in other sectors of crypto who could go, okay. Do you know what I mean? So, I mean, I could see how that could be cynical. I also could see how it's just the way it's going to be. So,
I just want to say quick. So maybe just throwing this out there, like we're doing the minimal viable DAO idea. What about the people get rewarded? So to sort of avoid the being spread too thin, but also like compromise and sort of try and find a middle ground between like not being too exclusionary. Maybe like a minimal viable podcast is kind of the barrier, and that I'm not, the barrier is the thing you would have to discuss really. Where do we set that threshold? Do you have to have a mic? Does it have to be video? Do you have to, but that also bounces off your idea when you were saying before about the compilation clip, and maybe it like incentivizes people to step the game up, and they go, oh look, that guy's got a video, it was really good, maybe I should do so. In this way, the MVP idea, minimal viable podcast idea, kind of incentivizes people. Look, you're already there, you got the mic, and this is just an example of video thing. It doesn't have to be this, but look, if you get to the video, you just get that camera. It doesn't have to be an expensive one, whatever. That's enough to get you, into the distribution of the funds. But that being said, that also excludes people. Yeah, my example of a camera sounds easy, not easy for everyone. Will that exclude too many people? Maybe
Well, I think,
that's where the grant thing comes in. We're saying we can do all these different ways to distribute things, or different ways to help people and get people rewarded. Maybe there's a grant thing to even get people to the minimum viable podcast, and that's like a separate like pot, if that makes sense. So yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, that's the point that I had first in my mind, and I lost it. You're right. It's almost like, I think implicit in this minimal viable podcast idea and everything we've discussed so far is like, and we've discussed it in previous eps, is like we still want to lift people up to a certain level, right? Not only that they can have the basics, mic, all the rest of it, the lights are on and whatever, but also like they can consider leaving their jobs and continue to make content to continue to grow the net. So maybe for the first couple of years, whatever, everyone reaches a certain level, as a minimum, like almost like a PodsDAO UBI. I don't know, like, and I don't know how we do that. The core team just gives everyone that no matter what, or it's not directed through the core team first, but like somehow the smaller podcasts that need the most money and the most lift up get priority first. But I think, yeah, because otherwise we're just going to have too much of a tail end of small podcasts that have too much of a ramp up. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, you could have 400 podcasts in the network, and if there's like 50 wheels, the 50 wheels could do all the sharing of the little guys, but it might still take too long to get them up to being able to leave their jobs. We just want that as quickly as possible, right? I would think. So
I mean,
yeah,
I want to say just to go back to the thing, the term you used, the sort of communist model. Not that it's that, but I'm just using that because you said it. I just thought that this. I mean, I want to hear what John and Klinemenic has to say, because I kind of think this sets the tone, right? This is like what if that makes sense. Like it's quite a this is like a hard issue. You know what I mean? This is something that has to be like kind of thought about in terms of like what are our values? Like this is a big like are we paying everyone equally? Are some more than equal than others? These are like this is like I don't know. I feel like this is kind of a crucial thing to for at least just our own sort of PodDAO's values.
can I take the question and set it in the decentralized structure context?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what how so if you have the minimal viable podcast and there's not really any need for a core team, then everyone really around the world, whatever they're doing, is just what they're getting out, whatever they put in, no matter what, the big guys, the small guys. So, like, the small guys could be incentivized to do a hell of a lot more to get more back. And the big guys, by retweeting or resharing, they're not going to get more. The rewards are built into the code or whatever. It's the same. If someone with a massive podcast retweets something, they get the same amount for doing that than the little guys do. So in that sense, you could say that the little guys are going to use the system in a way quicker, to lift themselves up more. So that's one way you could think about the minimal. There's just hands off. Everyone just gets out what they put in, and there's a fairness in terms of nobody gets preference. It's entirely what you get out, what you put in. Or you could have some sort of system which builds in on fairness in a way. The big guys get some more money because they're bigger guys and they're obviously lifting the little boats up a little bit more. Or the core team steps in and gives more money to the little guy. I mean, there's all these different, but once you build in the core team allocating money, that's more centralization. That gets worrying. Once you prefer the big guys, that's worrying, right? Because that's only going to go one way. They demand more and more and more. So, yeah, I mean, question of fairness and justice and all that, but into contextual in the model that we may or may not build. How does everyone? Yeah, you guys go ahead.
Well,
John,
just quick, can I say I don't see any reason why, as long as you have a mechanism by which to get people to the minimum viable podcast stage, and let's just say if that was the threshold, and I'm not necessarily, I couldn't, you'd have to be like very, I don't know. It seems like a extremely purist sort of stance to be against something like that, or like if that see that as some kind of like bad model. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that. It's just my view, but I feel like at least if you're trying to help people to get to that stage, as long as the stage isn't unattainable and they're helping them takes 10 years, that's crazy. But like say if the threshold is so low and you're doing something to help them reach the threshold, you're doing as much as you can. That's like, and the threshold would be in place. Think about ideas like you brought up, like the clips thing or the shorts. Like, what if people do we want to like flash a logo on the thing? I think looking like outwardly at like what would attract sponsorships and other people in to give us grants and things like that, would a minimum viable podcast, like bottom line sort of like this is the lowest sort of grade quality we'll take, because if we go below that, then it gets, I don't know, maybe it's just like it's not as appealing to the outside. I don't know, yeah, but I was said I was going to be quick, so you guys jump in, whoever wanted to, Spencer or John or yeah.
I think, well, one of the things I'm looking at for automating the payments to all these other podcasts, if say someone wants to give a grant or some donation of some big chunk of money to PodsDAO because they know it'll be split up amongst all these podcast creators, they could, as I understand it, we could make an OX splits contract. I just shared a link here, and then have whatever lands in that smart contract automatically get split up according to percentage to this list of wallet addresses. And so as more minimum viable podcasts get included into the network, they can be included on this list with a specified percentage, and we can make it all equal. Or, and here's one option that I'm curious what you guys think, is say there's like minimum viable podcast tier, and if they make that tier whatever the technical aesthetic qualifications we require there, they make that minimum viable podcast tier, that's like tier 1. If they contribute enough to the network, they can get up to tier 2, and then that counts as if they had 2 podcasts in this network, so they can get like a bit more of a percentage of that split of all the funds showing up there. And that it would just be as simple as changing the percentage on the OX split contract that goes to their wallet address. And so then we could define 2-tiered, maybe 3-tiered things. And we can put a limit on it too, so that it's not like one podcast has like 50 podcasts worth of donations going in. But if we have some kind of a tiered thing like that, that could incentivize just basic contributing to the network, stuff like that.
Okay.
I think it can all be automated with OX splits.
That's interesting. So that's interesting. So if I've understood it correctly, let me take a sec. So instead of, or you have one option where like you'd have to have almost a matrix to determine it, which is what I'm getting at, which is maybe just too much. I think me and you've discussed this before, Clinic, where contributor gets up out of bed, looks at the phone, and retweets 5 different clips across 5 different pods in the network. Ah, boom! That's $20 I got there. I'll do something else at lunch. And the system has to track which one did he retweet, how much views did that get, what's the digital ad revenue coming in off that, and then it's a super complex system to think about that. Instead of that minutiae of detail, you correct me if I'm wrong, as I've understood it, you have tiers where it's like we're not counting exactly the minutiae of what you've done. and you're not getting paid on that. But to get into tier 2, you kind of had to contributed to maybe 20 tweets a month, 50 tweets a month, right? So some sort of block estimates of what's valuable in the system. And if you're getting into that tier, then that's just it's sort of an easier concept than the one I'm talking about. The one I'm talking about seems like maybe way down the line, like, and even then maybe it's too complicated. But in the early stages, I think your model is kind of like easier to think about, easier for people to get there, knowing that they're going to get this chunk of money of the digital ad revenue, of the grantee money, or whatever, if they meet these requirements of growing the network effects or producing content or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, and it could even be something, we can always think about this further, but it could be something where every quarter or something we have some proposal where we can like vote for which podcasts get elevated to tier 2 based on what they've contributed. Like we can have a more objective kind of rubric for do such and such and such to qualify. But I think if we get really prescriptive about all that does entail a lot of tracking minutia and administrative stuff. But if we put the onus on the podcasts to contribute in ways they find meaningful, then it's on them to convince everyone else that they deserve to be brought up to tier 2 and get like another share's worth of the PodsDAO treasury split or something like that. It could be a kind of a lightweight way to do it. Yeah.
Do you see, I mean, I can't think of many reasons why it wouldn't work. The only one that I can think of is that could you in time see contributors going, hey, our whole model is based on views to digital ad money, and that's calculable to the T, that is, and yet you're just paying us in chunks. How are you guys calculating it? Maybe rather you just pay me, even if it's more work for you. Sorry, build it, not my problem. But I know what you're making on the digital ad revenue per tweet, per view, and I tweeted that last week, and my tweet brought it to 100,000 more people in my network, and you're giving me just stepping up to level 2. Could you see like a bit of a fucking revolution in amongst the contributors that go, hey, I want my lot more than what you're giving me?
Well, I mean, actually,
that's what I'd worried about in a digital economy. I'd worried that they'd have that data and they'd bring it against.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think I definitely think
rightly so, maybe. Yeah.
It's definitely plausible, and I think this kind of more equal footing OX splits thing. This could be something where just if PodsDAO gets a grant, and it's not from the specific ads or clips of specific podcasts, but just gets a grant, we can split it up like this. But then if these 5 podcasts cobble together some clips and they get all these views, maybe there's some portion of that goes to the whole big split, but they would break it down according to whatever views they got or something like that. Like you can have multiple approaches like this. It doesn't all have to be funneled through one big equal communist smart contract.
Well, what if you do both? So the sort of like in this maybe it's not both, but so the split contract, but it's, let's say, to reach tier 1, the bare minimum. I know you're saying like don't have too many like criteria, sort of just leave it to them. But you could at least have maybe at the bare minimum, if you to be in tier 1, you have to in some way either put in the description of your podcast or whatever, donate to PodsDAO. Like it's a donation link, right? It's just like and they, to be in tier 1, bare minimum, you have to share the link. And to be honest, if you do share the link, the more you share the link and everyone else shares the link, the more everyone gets paid, because the more it's out there. So there's like, I don't know, that just came to mind. So I thought that maybe just for like, I like this sort of like tier idea, and also trying to help people get up to that first tier. But if you're in the first tier, I feel like maybe at a bare minimum, include that in your donation link, sort of thing. That's like a thing of tier 1.
I know you're gasping to say something, Clinimex, so I'm going to go straight to you, but I'll just make one thing that's come into my head. Who's making the tiers? It's not some distant core team. If you have a live DAO of the podcasters and the contributors who have access to the data, you could put it on them to create the tiers. So that what are they going to come and rant about themselves? You create the tiers, what you guys think is fair as this incentive model. That's not us making it. It's like you do what you think's best. Do you know what I mean? And they'll surely reward themselves appropriately, but not be unreasonable about it. So that's one way to just put it back on everyone.
Yeah, I think that's a good solution. And it's also like it depending on if we want to do this quarterly and say this quarter there are 5 podcasts that are like applying for tier 2 status or something, and they'll essentially submit everything that they've done for the network, and then all the podcasts in the network or whoever the voting body is, it's on that whole body for like the majority of them need to be in favor of a given applicant to go up to tier 2. And then it's like then we don't need to be as prescriptive about what it takes. We can still say, oh, maybe there's this minimum thing of like in order to apply for this, you need to share the link. And then like that shouldn't be controversial. I think we can all agree on really simple stuff like that. But like if we're forcing ourselves to agree on a bunch of minutia and criteria, then like that's the kind of stuff that like can kill us before we get started, I think.
This leads me on to the next point, which is this is all leading towards this overall how this minimal viable podcast could work. And I think when we were talking about it behind the scenes before the pod and this week, we were like, what is the minimal amount that the PodsDAO members, the DAO members would want to do? Surely they'd want to just exit any members who are toxic as fuck, let's put it that way. And enter new members, again, do they pass the sniff test? Not any serious crazy vetting. So 2 votes, that's 2 votes in and out. And any sort of changes to the reward structure. And I think this could be that could be every quarter or every 6 months, whatever it is, whatever quarter is probably proper. That's reasonable to expect podcast content and contributors who love just making content and just want to get on to come together in the DAO every 3-4 months to go, hey, like who should be making it up to the next tier or not. That doesn't seem overly burdensome in terms of governance. Those 3 things, in, out, and who's getting paid, who's getting the tiers. So my question back to you guys then is, do you see that could work? And is there any other core things that the DAO members might need to do that we haven't touched on yet? Clinic, let's go to you, and then maybe John, and then back to Eves.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'm thinking about, because right now we could get this started. Like I just got the ENS DAO, the PodsDAO.eth ENS domain. I just got that. We could start this by minting subdomains for all the podcasts so far, just to start testing this out. And then I think I just confirmed that you can then apply an ENS domain to the OX splits contract. So we can say like split.podsdao.eth, and anyone that sends money to that, it'll automatically get split up to everyone according to the split. Like we can start doing all this stuff manually with myself or some individual doing this. And I think if we wanted that to be handled in a decentralized way, it's viable. It can be done. It would require the DAO itself to have some kind of on-chain presence. Could be a Moloch DAO. There are inexpensive ways to go about this. Where then if it's sitting in something like a Moloch DAO or some other kind of contract representing the DAO, then anyone, or we can configure this, but it can be such that any member can make a proposal to update some smart contract, or it could be something where next season someone does a tally of all of the podcasts in which tiers and deploys a new split contract, and anyone can do that. But in order to resolve the ENS subdomain split.podsdao.eth to that new one, the whole DAO could vote on actually resolving that ENS domain to the splits contract. I think there are ways to go about this whole thing, at least this aspect of what we're talking about, in a decentralized way. And it would just that kind of administrative stuff can be proposed by core team members and then just actually executed by the DAO. And I think that that's the only other category of stuff that I see now that would require this kind of work. But even it can be done in a way where it's actually executed by some DAO contract. And then the only other thing that I think that could possibly be like core team responsibility is if there's any legal entity stuff. And I'm not quite sure how necessary that is. I'd be curious. I know Muriel and I were talking about this a bit. I'm still curious to see if there's a way that we can delineate the PodsDAO mission in such a way that doesn't actually require a legal entity, and we just go about liability limitation a separate way.
How do you think, just sticking on that, on the legal side, the regulatory side, even getting into the PR, the communications, who talks to fundraisers, is there need for a core team or structure to do all this? Is there a way, you rather Mercurial would know this more than the rest of us, is there a way to just not need a core team to worry about all that shit because we are so decentralized and there's nothing to grasp? Who's going to grasp us? Where? Who? Do you know what I mean? Like, is there a way to do it, or is that just fantasy land? Especially because we want to be global. Yeah, go ahead.
It could be possible. I mean, I'm not. I don't feel qualified to say whether or not that is something like that is possible or legally advisable. But
I just want to say, shout out DarkFi, anonymous DAOs. It's possible. Well, yeah, no, sorry.
But I mean, I'm inclined to think it is. I think it may just the cost involved in that may just be that it would impose certain limitations on how effectively PodsDAO can scale if there isn't like an executive, like a C-suite or some board of directors or some centralized entity that assumes like legal and fiscal responsibility for the DAO. If we don't want that, that may set certain constraints on how much we can grow or what we can do. Like we may not have a PodsDAO bank account, or PodsDAO wouldn't be able to own land or be sued or something like that. And it would just put the onus on individuals to go about limiting their limitations. Like perhaps we could encourage podcasts to get LLCs or go through Opolis or something like that in such a way that we wouldn't need a legal entity. But all this stuff I think could very well be possible. But when it gets to that stage, and I don't think we need to really be too worried about it right now, when it gets to that stage, we can just get some legal counsel from LexDAO or something.
That's true. And I think even if there's a need for some core team with some minimal, just to keep the boat straight or legal, and I don't think the PodsDAO members would worry too much about that. They kind of get some assurance knowing that we're above board. But it strikes me that if at least it's not built in a way where that can get out of hand and overburdening and over centralizing and all the rest of that. We've seen so much in the DAO world. DAO members won't have a care in the world about it, specifically because like this, I don't know, maybe I'm talking shit, but maybe this DAO is maybe more unique in the sense that its DAO members are really like overwhelmingly going to be like independent small contributors who are making content around the world. You know what I mean? Like, as we've just discussed this whole pod, like in a way the hosts for sure are their own little thing, right? They're their own little behind the wheel, and maybe they have little other drivers who are driving with them, the producers, or maybe they're both sitting driving the same, whatever. Doesn't. But what I'm trying to say is like it just lends itself to, hey, you guys control as much as possible of your own destiny, and where we all interact is if it can be cut down to simply you put up into the network, the PodsDAO network, and it will spread the content, and it will accept your like, and it will register your retweet, and then on the flip side, the money flowing back doesn't necessarily need to go through any core wallet. Maybe for some things it does, if it can't be done any other way. But it strikes me if we can get around the legal regulatory by just somehow figuring out the smoothest way for the water to flow through the sieve, instead of like stops at a dam and then we have to decide to open the dam, the who, if it's just a dam with a sieve, just the water, that strikes me as pro-growth. Because if you're a podcaster out there, you know, like if I just set up the mic and I upload, if I'm accepted into the DAO, if I pass the sniff test and I just start growing content and I go about my day growing the network effects, you mean I just get money? If you're out there and you're like, some may say it's the gig economy, whatever, but like if you know there's no overly crazy stuff I need to do here, I just create content and boom, 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 and the money flows. Yeah, fuck, you can just see how loads of people would be like, boom, I'm in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that strikes me as pro-growth, and the more decentralized in this kind of a content DAO would encourage more growth.
Can I
Does anyone
just
have any? Yeah.
I just want
Go
to
ahead.
quickly. I'll try and say these quickly because we've got like maybe 3 points. So just on the well, this is one's for another episode. So I'll just be interested if you've heard of any criticisms of Moloch DAO, Clinomanic. That would be maybe cool for another episode. We start talking about actual making the DAO kind of thing. That could be a good another episode. But yeah, I guess I was just thinking about like. I looked at the link you put in here, and I think it's pretty cool. I was explored the website a little bit. It's like I'm probably going to read some of the case studies and stuff. Have a look at that. That's cool that they got that up there. It seems fun, seems interesting. I like the idea, and I like obviously before added to the idea of like maybe we get them to put this split contract link in the thing, and that's the minimum threshold for tier 1. But then it got me thinking about obviously this is like kind of on-chain stuff. This is public, I guess. And when we're talking about like helping people, not being I don't know, like helping people, it's not just us, like people in the West and whatever. It's like it's people, it's a global thing. That's what crypto is about. And you're talking, this relates to like the legal things you're talking about. I guess how do we protect? Is there? I guess I'll ask the question. Is there any sort of onus on us? Do we feel any duty to in some ways offer a way for people that maybe don't want to be public, or like, look, for example, if we're paying podcasters to do things like you brought up, Alex, we were like, do we want to help like the little guy in some like country where there's an authoritarian government? If he's like doing his podcast to speak out against that, then we want to have that guy. We want to help that guy. But can they? Then it's public that they're receiving payments from us. Like, does that cause any issues for them actually in their life? Like, so is there some kind of like privacy element? Obviously, it's like a Lunapunk theme. But this is the idea, right? It's like you can't ignore the fact that some people like having things on chain and not private and is not the best for everyone, I guess. And so yeah, of course there are lots of like privacy options on Ethereum, and there are different ways to do things. But I just thought I'd put that out there.
Yeah.
Also.
So do you want to tackle? Let's tackle that one first, then we'll go back to you for the next, because that's a fascinating question. So my word is privacy commit. Do you have to be public in your identity for creating your content? No, I mean you don't have to be in the video. Do you know what I mean? Like your guest could be. In fact, you don't probably necessarily. It's probably not a deal breaker to join PodsDAO that you have to do video content. Do you know what I mean? Like you could, if you're in there producing an audio pod and you put your pod mat, like this is going to be a small minority probably, right? The folks that are so maybe focused on privacy or whatever. But as long as you're growing the network effects of everybody else, who are we to say get out? You haven't made video content. You know what I mean? You're doing your bit. So I don't know if even you being anonymous as a podcaster personally is a big deal for us. I think I really see ways that could be accommodated. In terms of the money flow back, do we have to pay people in crypto? On chain, not necessarily. If there's other payment rails that are privacy oriented, what do we care? I mean, unless the DAO kicks up a fuss and goes, hey, like I heard that maybe so and so is getting paid tons, yeah, I ought to prove it. Do you know what I mean? Maybe that would cause an issue, but I don't think that there's ways that the DAO members could get comfortable with.
Well,
perhaps.
This is, in fact, this reminds me, there are some efforts to do this, and I guess, disclosure, I am part of Luna DAO, and we have invested in a thing called Fern Protocol, and they're trying to do something quite interesting with basically there's sort of like, to say it simply, there's like add-ons to MetaMask, right, or extensions. Like you have your Google Chrome browser, whatever, you have your extensions, you have your add-ons, or your Firefox, whatever it is you use. And they've done this kind of trick where you can like call a private smart contract. You can like send basically their Fern contract interacts for you or on your behalf, and it's private, and they're doing it in a kind of interesting way. I do have like a podcast episode actually coming up with them. But you can check them out. They're on Twitter. They've got a Discord and everything. But they're trying to do this like kind of privacy in a very unique way. But the reason I bring that up, specifically Fern, is because it's supposed to make it simple. You just put like a contract address in, and that you kind of plug that contract address in, and that like does the privacy element for you. It's like so. That's an option. I'm sure there are many other options, but just throwing that out there.
Let me let me throw this back to you, everyone. But I mean, do we owe an obligation to everyone, not just certain people that wanted privacy in payment rails? I mean, like, I don't think we can be a podcast DAO and have everyone anonymous, like, in terms of the content. I mean, I think we're going to have to see faces for sure. That puts people in difficult countries at risk. But are we putting them, like, I mean, of course, there's maybe, if you're really yapping out about the government, like in some cases, they could come after you because they see your face and they can identify you. But there may be a lot more countries that won't physically come after you, but they'll come after your money. So we probably at least can do something to protect people's money. Do we owe an obligation? Should we just make everyone's payment chain privacy protected so that the government, wherever, can't? We've seen how that can be done. They've shut down that in crypto before for even protesting. So
I mean, people have gone to jail for that, like writing smart contracts, and like
right.
I mean, it's a serious business. Like we're in like a experimental speculative thing that like's on the radar of every government because of money laundering and scams, and I mean, it's hot in the news, and it's like, if anything, right now, I mean, it's the bear market, but still, like, it's any media thing, publisher will try and like will try and jump on anything negative, and so we're I guess in some ways not unique in our exposure or like our or we should be unique in our concern, but also
another
no, go on.
Go ahead. Well, I was just gonna say another reason why it makes sense to not have the money that we get in too centralized, like not go through one funnel too much, because if they shut down that funnel, it kills everyone. Like, the more you can have the dam with the sieve, almost, how do they shut us down in terms of that? You know what I mean? They'll just it's really hard to shut down a sieve. Do you know what I mean? Like, but they also, on the content side, if anyone like steps out and says something really horrible on the content, because we're a collective, that will shine, that will not shine, that will spread and make everyone look like shit. So, and what I'm trying to say is, the more almost decentralized we are from each other in terms of that side of it as well, like, you know what I mean? That the reputation of one can't take down the reputation of everybody else. Do you know what I mean? It's anti-fragile both in content and payment rails. Like, so that any attack factors are kind of like, who do we hit, and how much impact? We take down one, can it take down, who does it take down? Do you see what I mean? This is crucial, you know what I mean? This goes into the whole questions of collective, core team, federated model, independent podcasters just everywhere, and it's almost like everyone's connected in some ways, but it's ethereal, and how do you grab it? Where is it? It's almost like, maybe do we have to build it that way? What other way could we build this? Do you know what I mean? Knowing that the attack factors will be so much. Yeah.
I think if we go the protocol level way of having the OX split automatically split up to people, and then we just like we periodically create a new split every time new podcasts are added to the network, or every time we change the tier arrangement, but that exists on chain, and that, to my knowledge, can't be taken down without compromising the whole network.
Right.
I guess I'm talking about. I'm not sure which other layer twos splits is set up on, but we can talk about that as well. In terms of
Right.
in terms of just to address the point about video content, I think if someone really doesn't want to have video content, but they want to be part of this, then they can just have that kind of animated wavelength thing,
Oh, yeah.
just so there's some video content to include. I mean, like, to me, that shouldn't necessarily be a deal breaker. And then
No,
as for
definitely not.
people in politically sensitive situations, it wouldn't. The only way I can see that being an issue for everyone else is if they're like a sanctioned entity or in some sanctioned jurisdiction, in which case any kind of commerce could incriminate people by association, and obviously that's not a very sound logic. Like we saw the dusting attacks with Tornado Cash and everything. But I mean, just for edge cases like that, and I don't think we really need to be too concerned with edge cases like that. But if we just for the sake of consideration, to me, that's another reason we may want to take the approach of not having the central entity or financial choke point account, and just have all the podcasts have their own LLCs or something like that, because then everyone as individual natural persons are protected, but it's also a way of distributing the whole liability of the whole network. I think, and then the actual DAO would just be smart contracts. And I want to get a bit more into this wrapper charter link that Mercurial sent here, but that could be viable. That could address some concerns.
Are we in a couple of weeks gonna crystallize here and thinking that that's the only way this is gonna be success? Because it's just, when you're a crypto media mission-based entity, it's almost like you're asking for trouble. Do you know what I mean? From people who will want to take you down for crypto, for hackable. Are you hackable as a team, as a network? For money, are you reputationally hackable? Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, do we want to just create a smart contract based swarm of independent podcasters? A swarm. They all congregate around the honeypot. Bring, you know what I mean? And they fly away and come in to get their catch and go away, and maybe bring something to the honeypot and leave it off and take what's theirs, and then zoom.
Yeah,
What brings us all together is the honeypot. We're like, PodsDAO will be the honeypot, but people come and go, and it's not nuts. So I don't know.
I mean, just really quick about this, I think, just in the interest of all this and minimizing that kind of risk, I think if we lean more into being pro financial sovereignty and pro enabling creators to make a living creating content, and less anti-establishment, like for its own sake, like that's where I kind of take a bit of a step back, in that I'm pro all this sovereignty, and I'm interested in like speaking out when we think there's some kind of corruption or preventing people from earning a living doing totally legal valuable things, but like being outspokenly anti-establishment, or like almost giving out some kind of a vibe of antagonizing authorities without there being much of a reason to, like that could be what maybe gets us on the wrong radars. But if we're just promoting essentially creative industry and enabling people to do this, and creating good content, and probably a lot of it will be educational content too, which is notionally a public good, then I wouldn't imagine there would be much reason to put like a target on our back, unless for whatever reason we're like stealing business away from corporations that have monopolized podcasts. And like I don't know, I feel like that's a relatively good problem to have.
So let me. I mean, you may have a different opinion on this, but like, quite honest, I am completely there. Whenever I think of anti-establishment podcasts, content in crypto, I rarely can think of any that are like screaming from the rooftops about let's burn it down, like let's take to the ramparts now. Most of the content out there is, in its anti-establishmentism or whatever, is let's take out the intermediaries. Let's do things ourselves. Like, that's, in all things considered, not fiery, get the guns. That's moderate, let's build from below. But that's still anti-establishment. It's just the word anti-establishment scares folks. But there's no one out there, I can't really point at anyone who's a podcaster that you'd be like, asking for trouble. The vast majority are, sort of based in the creative sectors, environment, you can kind of loosey-goosey economic, collaborative economy, imaginaries, but nothing's really like going to poke the backs of people. Like the government, they shut us down. Like, nobody's really doing that. Do you know what I mean? If any of the rhetoric's going to come through in some particular outbursts, maybe where people get riled up in content or whatever, but that can be managed. But none of the themes of the pods, I can imagine, are going to come in and go, oh, it's going to be underlying themes that can be moderated. But so whenever I ask what I mean by anti-establishment, it's a very sort of milk toast in a way, because that's what's just out there. You know what I mean? You say anyone who's looking at the podcast crypto space and going, oh, whoa, who the fuck's that? There's nobody out there doing that shit. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you can do it in a way that's smart and sensible. What was the other thing I was going to say? I can't remember. But it just sounds like we're all kind of on the path of this minimal viable. If it can be done, all the better. I'm almost anticipating now, like, we're more vulnerable to a core hack of the treasury than anyone taking us down for reputation. Because if we're dispersed, we can go, well, we're just part of a network. Like, we're not, so and so said something, the DAO members can vote them out, but we're not all vulnerable. But if there's a central treasury, that could be hacked. So that's maybe what I'm worried about more. But do we have confidence that there could be a solution to that? Then yeah. Okay. Should we move on? Just in the interest of, we could probably get 10 minutes left, and we're at the 2 hour mark. Well, I can keep going, but it's up to you guys. But here's what I wanted to ask, especially because we have you both on, and Eves and I have mentioned it behind the scenes. At what stage do we go and just approach a couple of protocols or sponsors or whoever, maybe a month down the line, 2, 3, and just go, hey, this is what we have so far. We have 50 podcasters. We have, let's just project into 2 months' time. We've done these amount of accumulated clips that have had this amount of views. We're talking to 30 other podcasters who want in that we're vetting. Here's what 6 months looks like. Here's our strategy, our plan. Here's the players that we have in. At what stage do we go and just talk to people and go, we've done this, which is okay. We want to get to this, so we don't expect anything from you now, but let's just have a conversation about what in 3 months' time or 6 months' time, if we meet milestones, what would that look like for you to sponsor us, to give us whatever? Like, what does that sort of relationship look like? My question is, when can we at least approach those conversations to at least have something to bring back to the DAO and go, hey, they're open to it. Here's what could be. Because I think there's a massive amount of value in here's what they said could be. Because then you can go out to other podcasters and go, oh, we've already spoke to a couple. And if we get to this, this, and this is what it could be. And then everyone goes, oh, starting to look tangible. Do you know what I mean? So even the conversation is a massive thing. So based on your guys' experience of the space, whatever, when do you think, what we'd have to have in place to have those conversations? Let's go to John first. What's your instinct, mate?
I mean, I'd say a culture and lots of content. You know, you can't look desperate like you're in it for the money. You know, you got to create something that says I would be doing this anyway. You know, and before you can actually go start pitching and, you know, hit up a lot of business development. So that's just my take on it.
Okay, Lena.
I mean, I think, well, one of the things I wanted to say is like if the protocols we're actually using, whether it's splits or MolekDAO or ENS or hats, if we demonstrate good use cases of these, and if the companies behind these protocols, uh, you know, are big enough to, are actual companies that can afford sponsorships and stuff, then we can approach them because we're actually using them. We're not. It's not something that we're just pretending to promote. That can be an interesting thing, and then they may be willing to settle for like less than competitive exposure because it's such a valid use case. Like if we're using this, like what we're describing here, this combination of splits and ENS, like even that, like we don't need any DAO contract to do that. That combination there is already pretty cool. If we make a split for all these podcasts and then put, you know, split.podsdao.eth on that split contract, so anyone that sends to split.podsdao.eth has their donation split up amongst all these podcasts, like that's already a censorship resistant and functional and pretty lightweight thing. It's just, it would still be centrally managed. And then if we wanted to put that into a MolekDAO or some kind of hats thing, we'd be bringing in these other protocols, and it would still all exist on a protocol layer there and be more decentralized. And they'd be pretty awesome use cases of these protocols too. And then like if we could do the same thing with hats as well. Like there could be, if we have the hats the lens, sorry, if we could do the same thing with lens, we get the lens handle eventually sitting in the treasury of the MolekDAO, and people can vote on how to do stuff like this, or we can appoint certain people in the network to handle PodsDAO social stuff on Lens. That's an awesome use case of Lens. So like I think a lot of these things, based on how we use them, are kind of organic advertisements for the protocol itself. But as for your what I think your main question was, it's just like at what point are we getting enough views to be reaching out to sponsors?
I got one more thing too to add on to what you were saying about the splits and stuff. Like, yeah, you want to have a bunch of people join in to grow the network, so that's a plus side. But a downside, if you're doing these splits, what is the incentive to want to add more people on and split it up even further and lessen your share?
Yeah, I mean, and this kind of gets back into the tiered thing as well, where like if we have the system of tiers, then if you contribute more, then you can get like two podcast shares worth of splits. And this what I'm talking about here is just like the kind of the UBI split. And then there can be other ones where if your podcast and 5 other similarly themed podcasts put together this reel and then get a sponsorship on that, then like that sponsorship revenue can just be split between the people that the podcast that put that together, and you know, or they can also elect to send a portion of that to all the other ones. But I think there can be like side splits that are more focused on rewarding individual incentives and stuff like that. And then this kind of base split would just be if there's anyone out there that likes the idea of giving to 200 podcasts with one donation, they could just send to split.podsdao.eth. But that wouldn't be the only one necessarily, you know.
There's gonna, John, I thought there's gonna have to be a little bit of just in the early stages, a little bit of to grow the thing in the long term. Yeah, we're gonna get less of the piece of pie now because the more we get in, sure, this pie gets split up less between us all. But the whole point, I think that's why the whole point has to hammer home. Like we want to grow this thing because the network effects will be beneficial for us all in good time. And the only way by being bigger means more money is if you can monetize your content to get more views, to get more people who want to sponsor your videos. I mean, what other growth model will bring in more money? You know, expansion equals more. So clean, but so there has to be a little bit of sacrifice almost at the start. And that's where culture comes in. People have to buy into the culture and the vision to be able to wait for more money. Quick question to you, Clinomedic, because of what you just said, and then back to my original question. I'll go to you. You can answer that because I think you were going to, and then to Eves. do you see any concern with, say, you use the example of 5 podcasts get together and make their own sponsorship deal? Is there a risk that those 5 podcasters will just share each other's content to get the split of the sponsorship deal? They'll almost create a balkanized part of in PodsDAO, and then they won't share everybody else. So the pie he's gone. Cheers, John. And it gets limited. The pie is limited because everyone's like, let's just group together us 5, and us 5 can get enough for ourselves. We're happy with what us 5 can get.
I mean,
is there a risk with that? And then you can go back and answer the bigger question. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a chance of something like that happening, and I don't necessarily think it's such a bad thing, especially if those 5 podcasts went off and made some reel and generated some advertising revenue from that reel, and then they just split it amongst those 5. If they still have like a PodsDAO logo on it, then that still at least gives some kind of exposure to PodsDAO. And I don't see why they would be incentivized to remove the logo, especially if we set some kind of criteria for, like, if you want to be part of the PodsDAO split, you need to have some kind of logo or something in your materials.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty reasonable. It's a very lightweight ask. It's not like we're taxing anyone. I feel like there's a way to get people to add value to the network and remain part of the network without this kind of taxing stuff. But aside from that, I honestly think it could be fine if 5 podcasts wanted to go off and make their own thing and split it, so long as they have the little logo thing there. If even one would force that, I don't know.
I think this all comes back to, why can't we have all worlds? Do you know what I mean? Because if we as a network can't build incentives wherein even pillars, like, if we can't build incentives where even the 5 podcast pillar or specific grouping doesn't want to share other, like, we haven't built the incentives well enough, right? Share this other content and you'll see some fucking incentives. We can't build that. And if we do build it and they still don't want to, then what the fuck do we do? But I feel like we can build incentives where they do both. They do their own little thing in the pillar, and they also are incentivized to do everything else. And it also is a good thing for all the reasons you just said. But if we're also thinking we have a broader based open door to get in, layer 1, and then naturally groupings will happen based on content, based on their own thinking about what could be a good ad. Because if you're 5 solar punk pods, you might just have better contacts within the 5 of you, have more thoughts about what could be a good little ad strategy for us. It could be more efficient in getting some content out. 5 of them think through what could be a good content ad, or the whole fucking network steps in and determine it. So maybe it's a good, efficient, successful thing for all these things to happen. The whole thing's incentivized to share, but also you have the pillars and the reels and stuff to do their own thing. Why the fuck not? And maybe there's just, hey, do your own pillar thing, but maybe there's a little bit you give back to the overall network. Maybe call it a tax, whatever. Like, I don't know what, but if it's small and everyone's up to it, and I don't see that as a problem.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, and then I also wanted to address some of the Ives points here. But yeah, like to that point, I think we could tie this into some tier 1 / minimum viable podcast requirement, where, like, if we just lay it out so it's accessible, people can join. Like, I personally don't think video needs to be necessary if someone doesn't want to show their face. But like, it could just be something where one of the requirements there, and we don't have to get much more prescriptive than this, is just having some logo or some little slide at the beginning or end of the podcast saying this is a PodsDAO podcast, or this podcast is part of the PodsDAO Alliance, or something like that. And then we can also include the split address there as well, split.podsdao.eth, and as well as, like, that podcast can include their own subdomain if they have one. So like hypothetically, if like JournoDAO's PressFix podcast or whatever is in this, we can have some slide, say at the beginning or the end, says PressFix is part of the PodsDAO Alliance. To donate to PressFix, you can go to donate to pressfix.podsdao.eth, or if we have our own, we can just say that. And we can also say, if you want to donate to the whole alliance, donate to split.podsdao.eth. I think having something as simple as that could be enough. And then if podcasts have that, they can form their own private groups and privately share revenue. You know,
Yeah,
just
Yep.
I think
Yep.
I like
Yeah.
that idea, and I think it also sort of like bounces off. Even it sort of like satisfies some of my maybe criticisms or concerns of, and also Alex, you've raised some things as well about it being decentralized and being like elusive or evasive, or kind of like coming. What was the metaphor? You're like dancing around the honeypot or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and in some ways, Spencer's like solution is kind of like that. It's like very simple, and while as he said, it's controlled. At the moment, then we can move on to other things, and there's ways to do these things. Yeah, keeping it simple is actually a way to make something anti-fragile, right? That's the complexity is where all this is why the bridges, the DAO, the fucking things get hacked. All these things get hacked. So in sort of by default, it is kind of censorship resistant in some way, and also just to be on sort of like, I don't want to say technical level because I'm not like the most learned person at this, but people talk about like privacy and things, but as far as I'm aware, Ethereum, the really knowledgeable privacy people will probably know a lot more about like the sort of technical aspects of privacy when it comes to relating to Ethereum, the base layer. But as far as I'm aware, right, you can set a wallet up in a way, you can have an address, you can have a private key in a way that you're anonymous, right? You have this public key and private key, but only you know that's yours at the time of creation if you do it right. And so same with like Bitcoin. So the issue is when the wallet is linked to you in some way, right? Then that's the problem, and then it's a persistent thing. So once the link is made, once the association is made, then you can track everything they've done and into the future, in the past and into the future. But if you just create like if you spin up an Ethereum, you essentially are private if you do it in the right way, or anonymous. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there, but I like the idea of it being simple, and also the minimum, like we maybe could ask, and they don't have to be video, that was just like an example, but should probably be like share the split link, in some way, like that's fair. That has to be the minimum thing. I feel like that's not even an ask really. We're just like contribute to the group. That's what we're saying by doing that, really. If you can look at it from that perspective, it's like we're just asking you to contribute. That's it. It's a link, and that's how we generate money. But are we asking a lot? No.
And I think you're totally right about the like that point, and also about the privacy preserving. Like I haven't heard of Fern before you shared this, but it seems like at least I'm like mental model wise, I'm going off of what I understand of Tornado Cash, and what we could do is like we could have this just normal, like whether it's mainnet or some layer 2 thing. It would probably have to be mainnet if we're talking splits and ENS domains and stuff. But I think like we could have that main one that's transparent. We'd also I also believe in encouraging people in the network to create dedicated wallets to stuff like this, to like receive funds for this, so that it's not automatically linked to their whole on-chain history as it is. So you can create a new podcast, if you create a new wallet if you want to. That's the one that the subdomain can go to. Like you can create a new wallet address for, if you wanted, fiatlux.podsdao.eth, so that it's not mapping onto a wallet that has a bunch of history already. I think we can encourage people to do that. And then if there's some other privacy protocol to facilitate things in a more privacy preserving way, my inclination is to have that be opt-in for podcasts that want to opt into this privacy thing, rather than making that the kind of standard that everyone has to abide by. Because I think that at least in the US, the whole Tornado Cash thing had a chilling effect, even though it wasn't that sensibly gone about. It's like I personally would want to draw the line before interacting with certain privacy preserving things. Like if it's anything approaching what Tornado Cash was, I'd have reservations about it. But I think having something like that be an option for people, because maybe other people are in a jurisdiction where it's not a concern, so they can opt into it if they want. But I think making the standard operation be as safe and agreeable and like legally safe as possible, that's probably where my mind would go. But I definitely agree that making these options available for people is good.
Can I just say quick?
Can I
go on.
just check if my mic's still working? Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. That's just a couple of quick thoughts, if you don't mind, Eves, because quick ones. I'll be real quick. I don't agree. I don't think we should enforce anything on anyone. I don't think it'll work. So there's only you can do is present good options. The second one, like when you said, let's put the link on the DAO clip, donate the DAO, donate the PodsDAO. That sounds to me a little bit like, who are we saying that to? Are we saying that to the audience? And is it still based on the old model of volunteer subscriptions from the audience rather than driving the money from, sponsors, right? For me, that here's the clip. If you like the content, give us money, audience. Maybe I'm wrong, but that sounded what it sounded like to me. I think that could work, but it's going to be less. It's not. Nobody's making money off the audience. Do you know what I mean? In podcasting. So I think how do we build that autonomy idea that you had into sponsorship? Like how do we, when we're driving the money from sponsorship primarily, audience capture like in money from them is minimal. Maybe I missed that.
Oh yeah, I think you're totally right, and I think thankfully we can have both. Like we can have this master split that goes for everyone, and that's where grants can go. Like there can maybe some institution wants to give $10,000 to support this podcast creator economy if there's 200 podcasts in this network or something like that. And then if there's for like revenue stuff, if there's some subset of those podcasts, 10, 15 podcasts that all show this one advertiser, then there could be another split just for those. Like, so in theory, we can have an arbitrary number of splits out there that are all geared towards different revenue sharing models.
Yeah.
And we can have both, because otherwise I agree, we wouldn't be able to rely on just listener donations.
And that's fab. That's about smart contracts. That's viable, isn't it? Like, as soon as you've worked out like where the money's coming from, it's easy to smart contract into the splits. Okay. Quickly, Eves, because I know you want to say something. The last thing I'd say is back to we're not just video content. We can be audio. We can invite audio podcasts in. Here's the question I would have. I'm for that, and we could still make it work if they're putting out clips that are just like audio. But I think maybe minimal viable standard for PodsDAO is that you accompany your MP3 audio with at least a visual of your pod, because the visual just gives so much opportunity. Because if we're talking about the actual clip, right, a video clip, like where would Lens, for example, sponsor it? We've talked a bit before. You only need a couple of seconds flash, their logo comes up, or 2 or 3 second flash where Lens, decentralized, central media, blah, 3 seconds, boom, off to the clip. Actually, with audio, where for the full 60 seconds you have DAO's logo, that's 60 seconds. You can have Lens's logo here as well. It maybe even bring in fucking more money than who knows. But maybe you could say video content will get more views because it's more interactive. But my point is that can still drive a lot of growth. The audio, so we shouldn't disclude it. We really should be open arms to everyone here as much as possible, unless we have a really sound reason not to invite people and incorporate ideas. Do you know what I mean? Like, we should not be. Okay, yeah. Eve, sorry.
I guess I was gonna say, just sort of like something that I thought was maybe interesting is like when you were mentioning Clinomanic about sort of the tornado cash situation, and it kind of came to me. I thought there's like a strange, like a juxtaposition involved where it sort of like works both ways. So essentially, in a way, you were saying like if you're associated with it, that could get us in trouble. For example, the tornado cash kind of idea. But then there's the other side and the idea of like, by not using Tornado Cash, there's people like, for example, and I use this example because it's like a potent one and everyone understands it, like North Korea. So in some ways, like you get in trouble for using it, you get in trouble for not using it. You know what I mean? It's like it's a weird juxtaposition at how that kind of works based on geography and legal, jurisdictions, all that kind of stuff. It kind of like turns itself around. But yeah, I also wanted to say I really think that it's a good start with the split. And I think it's a great contribution. Looks pretty like I've only just obviously just browsed it because I've been doing this, but it looks like really simple and like intuitive, and it's a cool little tool. Cool. I've not seen that before. I mean, I knew things like that were available, but it's nice to have another one. I'm sure there are plenty of other ones that I don't know if this is the best one, if you chose this one for like a very specific reason, but we can explore that maybe another time. But yeah, tier 1, I'm thinking maybe we're talking about maybe tier 1, right, is the like
The UBI.
I don't well yeah, exactly. So the split is like we're helping everyone at the tier 1, and maybe the tier 2 people, that's where the sponsorship deals are coming on, and we can do the thing where like everyone gets a chance to make a little bit of money. That pot's split. We're helping everyone there. Then tier 2, maybe there's some requirements because we've got to interact. We've got to form agreements with other DAOs. Maybe let's just say like Uniswap, right? Let's say they want to offer us some money. I don't know exactly how that works, but there might be some requirements. There might be some kind of like relationship we have to maintain and stuff. So maybe the tier 2, that's like, in some ways a little more serious. And so there's more interaction, there's more, I don't know, more stuff going on. So like, but the tier 1, I mean, it's a really nice idea. We can sort of, again, help everyone, do like a public service basically, or public good. And I guess the last thing I didn't say before, this was ages ago, but I was going to say on the LLC thing, like I suppose my position, I really did think like if the government sort of come after you for like making $200 out of a smart contract, then I mean I don't want to be too like crass on stream, but where they can shove it, if you know what I mean. Like, no, that I mean, and like I'm joking, but also on a serious note, it's like, dude, if someone's just trying to like make some $200, then like that's some tyrant shit, and like I'd probably say we should be against that.
I don't think they're gonna do that.
No, I don't exactly. I think that's not.
Our
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna happen, but I just did make me think like I'm not against it, and I did put my counter to it about like other DAOs and things and grants and even people outside of crypto that want to interact with us, like they might require us to have an LLC, so you also might have to get into a legal framework, or there's benefits to get into the legal framework, and there's disadvantages because like it's not censorship resistant, and there's people that can be held accountable in more of a sense, and so there's benefits and negatives, but yeah, like I say, I would say like one of the things I suppose, and again just to go back to like crypto values, is kind of like the whole cool thing about having like smart contracts and DAOs and all this stuff, is that it's the opposite of that. Well, it's not necessarily the opposite, right? It's still an organization, still making decisions, still stakeholders and all that kind of stuff involved in a lot of DAOs, but in some sense, well, it's the point is you don't have to ask permission, and an LLC is technically asking permission to be formed by the state, I suppose. It's a state sanctioned organization in some sense, if you want to look at it very loosely. But yeah, I'm just saying, I guess that's those are kind of my views. Yeah.
I mean, I think about the LLC and legal entity thing. I don't think that would be required. I think it's something that we can encourage, just like encourage people to do, and we can share educational resources. Like Opolis could be a good resource for this, because they enable these kind of self-employed single member LLCs and stuff like that to like benefit from traditional like employment, healthcare arrangements and whatnot. Like, so I'm sure we can work out some kind of partnership with them. I think I think Eureka John's with them as well. So I think that we can encourage stuff like this. I don't see it necessarily. I don't see it being necessary according to my understanding, because I think you're right. Like part of why all that happens is that you do need to, at least in the U.S. And again, I'm certainly not a lawyer. Mercurial would know more than I do, but for LLCs, to my knowledge, you do need to like register with the Secretary of State for your state and get some kind of approval and be on registries and get like an employer identification number. And there's a responsible party that has to interfere, like all this stuff. And I don't think any of that needs to happen at the PodsDAO level, but we can encourage it at the individual podcast levels if they think it's necessary for their podcast. You know?
Yeah, that'd be cool if you want to facilitate people. So and I'm not even saying like I was against that. That would just be, that's like my, I don't know, that's my like sort of personal politics, and that's kind of like my stance on it. But at the same time, because of my personal politics, I am not for stopping someone that would be in PodsDAO for doing that, right? But like, if it didn't have to be at the PodsDAO level, but we could facilitate, because there are benefits. And also, if you look at, again, I'm not the expert on the like DAO law, but as far as I'm aware, there are states in America that, like Wyoming, that are favorable to DAOs. And so I don't know how it works, but I'm imagining at least that, like, in contrast to how the UK would work, you form a company, you obviously go on like some kind of like government register. It's, the details don't matter. It's like Companies House. I mean, sure, Alex, you sort of know what I'm talking about. There's like, you form a limited company, but you have to have a board. I've done it. You have to have a board of directors, and you have to like state who they are. And then there's a bunch of details and things you have to put in, and people are basically made responsible for decisions that are made for the company and doing tax returns and things like that. You're obligated to do like a tax return like that. So you have to do this now unless you dissolve the company and blah 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 blah. So you have certain obligations. So that's one of the reasons sort of against maybe counter argument. But like I say, the point is maybe Wyoming, maybe there's a way where they're like, look, we realize that DAOs are fluid, and like it's not just, oh, he's the CEO and there's the 5 directors or whatever. We understand DAOs and they don't work necessarily like that. So the liability doesn't fall on people in the same way. I don't know. So to counter my own position, I'm saying I'm not opposed to it, and I'm sure there are like, sort of things that are in the traditional system, so to speak, that are like beneficial and also more open and more progressive. I'll put it that. That's probably the best way to put it.
So just to take this and move into another question, which I think is going to provoke us all on this topic, is are you saying, Eves, that how the individual podcasters are set up is something that we can't control, and it's up to them, really? We can only give them options. We probably shouldn't even think about doing anything else other than giving them options and letting them choose what they want to do, especially if it's only them that has to take the risk, right? I mean, that's the only thing that we can do, surely. No?
I mean, there's loads of stuff to talk about in terms of like how we do it and how we manage them. Do we step back and I think like the splits thing, that by default it kind of can be hands off. So again, we can sort of structure this differently at the different layers, and people opt in like, well, look, I'm agreeing that if I'm in this thing, I'm going to sort of like abide by the rules of the thing. But then there's a tier where there aren't many rules. All you have to do is include the payment and the split link. You know what I mean? We can sort of like, we can factor in. No, it's a good point, but I think we can factor in everyone in this, if that makes sense.
No, it's a different question. Sorry, I should have been more clear. I'm not talking about the tiers. What I thought you were talking about there is, aside from the tiers, is you were talking about how with LLCs, individual podcasters should structure themselves in the real world to pay taxes and whatever else to protect. We should leave it at that level. We should leave it up to them, not how they engage in the tiers. I mean, that's entirely up to them. But we as a DAO shouldn't be saying you need to be an LLC or don't be an LLC, because that's engaging with the system and we're against that. We have to be hands off for that. We have to go whatever.
Yeah, no, I wasn't. Not. Yeah. Not like, oh, yeah. Cool.
Cool. Okay, so here's the next question, which surprised we haven't.
Well, just
talked
quickly,
about it.
the point is that could put them at risk. So like by us being like, oh,
That's the
what if they are
discussion.
someone in an authoritarian dictatorship and we're like, yeah, well, we don't want, we're anti LLC or
Well,
whatever, you know, and then they end up in jail.
but what can we do? Do you know what I mean?
We can
What can
be
we do?
we can be anti their government, but then we don't have to influence them to make bad decisions about their life, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we all we can do is give them the best way to protect themselves, and without forcing it on them or making it. All we can do is provide the best options to protect them. Here's what you can do to protect yourself. Probably you should do it, and then who's gonna be like, nah, fuck that, and they'll probably go, oh, thanks, PodsDAO guys, options, cool. Okay, here's the next question. We've missed the biggest attack factor in the whole of PodsDAO that could bring us all down. We've talked about choke points in the wallets. How do we distribute the money when we've got it? Surely the ultimate choke point is the sponsors. Do you know what I mean? Like if they're attacked, that we're screwed. So how do we build a fundraising? How do we build a system wherein we're anti-fragile enough to get funding from many different places, many different sponsors, many different avenues, that there is no possible way that the money could be shut down and we're fucked?
Oh, you mean like if a sponsor just backs out on a deal or somehow stops paying despite us holding up our end of the deal?
It could be any number of things. Anything that stops the sponsors saying we're stopping our interaction with PodsDAO. How do we build a decentralized system enough, perhaps, that nobody can ever say to Lens or to Ave or whoever, hey, don't be engaging with PodsDAO.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think this could be. I mean, if we go the route of podcasts can autonomously group together and kind of broker these advertising deals. Like I really like that idea. It does open up this risk of, if there are these 5 podcasts that really aren't professional and they're like using the name of PodsDAO and reflecting poorly on PodsDAO, and they do something and they fuck up, then we can pass some proposal to like kick them off the split or something like that. I mean, I think we can have this stuff explicit in some kind of bylaws or something eventually to cover these edge cases. Like, do you think that gets at what you're saying, or not?
It's an interesting it does from that end. You're right. How to prevent the problem happening in the first place and then deal with it once it does.
Yeah.
But it's almost inevitable that will in some regard. So my question is, when it does, almost, you could find that all it takes is for one fucking incident, and we know how the world works. Someone on some pillar goes, fuck it, I don't know, fuck some minority grouping, whatever. And by that stage, in the world that we live in, it's toast. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I think,
how do we, is there any way to build structures where the payment rails are so interlinked that you can't pull out, or it's not just from one company piping in, but it's like overlapping a land? I don't know, but that's a massive risk. Content could be controversial, could bring down the network because all the money stops at once for reputational reasons.
The simple way is just the entry form that we're talking about. Like, we can, I mean, that's like super simple. Obviously, that's not going to cover everything, but at least that's one thing you can put in place that's so simple and allows you to see, oh, well, let's go just check out the podcast. Okay, look, it's got like fucking, I want to kill all X people in, full caps. Like, well, obviously that guy's not like, like, you know what I'm saying? So like that, that's not going to stop the complexity of all the other things. It's just a simple thing. But I think actually, but putting some simple filtering in place is the sort of best you can do. You can't micromanage every single opinion, and you know what I mean? So you can do the best you can. Like you say, it's probably inevitable. Something's going to happen, whether it's going to be toast, done, not too sure. Things happen. But yeah, I think at least if you're trying to put like some things in place. But yeah, go ahead, Spencer, because I know see you had something to say.
Go ahead,
I was gonna
Spencer.
say, I'd say a combination of that's good as like one kind of screening layer to like there's some kind of agreement like we're not gonna have hate speech or like encourage illegal activities or whatever the wording is that we agree on for that kind of entry thing to get into tier 1 like minimum viable podcast thing. There's that. There's the possibility of getting kicked out if you do something like that. And then also I think part of it could be if we very carefully craft the copy and the messaging about what PodsDAO is, and that these podcasts aren't like they're associated with this network. Like PodsDAO is this association of like autonomous podcasts, and they're all. It's not like any one of them represents the whole body of them necessarily. I think we can have some kind of nuanced messaging about that would convey to sponsors that if a couple of these podcasts mess up, you can just work with other podcasts in the network. It's not like the whole network of podcasts is like it's not like they're all bound to one another. I guess like you can like sponsors can have like an a la carte approach.
Can I just throw in quickly because I think this might be important. Like I'm trying to find a sort of a middle ground because you mentioned like things that are illegal there, and it just made me think of like, yeah, I could imagine the kind of things that you mean by that. And then there's kind of like, I suppose edge cases in a way, but they're not really edge cases now. We're talking about like being progressive and things. It reminded me of like illegal. Obviously, there are lots of things like like.
Cannabis.
Someone murdered someone, or someone was a murderer or serial killer host. You know what I mean? So that's crazy, right? Like, yeah, so that's illegal, right? But then on a serious, this is serious though. Like for like Alex, I think didn't you have like some guy was talking about psychedelics, and that sort of got me thinking like, what about like in states where like there's like veterans that are there's all this like research with psychedelics and PTSD, like something sort of like that as like liberal people were sort of like used to, and we kind of accept that we're like, okay, we're adults. We see obviously that there's a lot of propaganda in the past, but unfortunately the laws say that it's like, where do we stand on that? Because that's not like drug dealing or murder or whatever, right? But all these things fall under the spectrum of illegal activities. So I guess I was wondering for that sort of case, like we'll talk about, for example, Alex, you brought up mental health. You said that's an important thing. Where do we stand on like psychedelic research and things and mental health, and like, because that's illegal in some places.
So I think this is just like, you still hear me? Yeah. Okay. The way I would look at this is like, there's a difference between being, you just have to be careful with your language. I mean, like, where our podcast is based in the US, and whilst cannabis is legal here, not financial advice, kind of the disclaimers, like, follow the law. We're not advocating for the break the law, but let's discuss what it means. There's content ways, verbal, vernacular ways to get around legalese. It's part of being a podcaster. You just got to watch yourself. If you overtread that line, then you're dumb or you're just not responsible enough. So there's ways to talk about illegal things without stupidly treading over the line that's going to get you in trouble by go out and do this illegal thing. Like, no, like, just talk about it, but don't say go and do it, folks. That's how they get you, Ooh, think about Bitcoin as an investment, not legal advice. I mean, so do you know what I mean? Like, it's the other thing here is we're operating globally. So back to Clenomedic's point, like, is there ways that like you can build a structure where sponsors can move and still get value? Can you build content pillars that there's not just one lunar punk pillar? So if that lunar punk pillar falls down, we're fucked for lunar punk content for a while. You have competing lunar punk pillars across countries so that one country's pillar doesn't go down. Is there cross-based alliances in sponsorship so people feel a responsibility not just to themselves in terms of their content? I'll say whatever the fuck I want. No. Maybe temper what you are saying, because the collaboration we do with that pillar gets us all a bunch more money, and we're kind of responsible to them as well. So let's let's say what we think, but let's just be extra focused on how we say it, or we burn everyone's boats.
Yeah.
So is there a way interlinkages where this could happen? Externally, could we set up alliances where Lens groups together and does a joint sponsorship with something like, I don't know, something that gives them cover? Do you know what I mean? There's maybe ways that you can fit in time. I think we'll be sophisticated in doing this, but in the meantime, we can just say, look, you know, we're trying to speak our passions here, but like, don't be fucking stupid, because we're trying to build this for everyone. So speak what you wish, but don't be stupid, or you'll be out. And we have to quite make it public, I think, in the early phases, because that's when we're going to be attacked the most. Kill this thing before it gets something big. I.e., if someone's coming out with some stupid shit about hate, you're fucking out quickly. Do you know what I mean? We have to almost make an example if you're really putting everyone in jeopardy. Then, as we get bigger, we can think about the nuances.
I tend to agree, and I also think that if some group of 5 podcasts in the network goes off and privately brokers some sponsorship deal with Lens, then like the onus is on them to be responsible. And if they're so irresponsible that they threaten the PodsDAO brand at large, then yeah, we can kick them out, make an example of them, whatever it is, stuff like that, if it's that extreme. But like short of that, like they also, those podcasts would and should be naturally incentivized to be professional if they want the sponsorship arrangement to keep going, you know.
And that's where you have to have this wonderful decentralized autonomy for all the reasons that we've focused on in this episode. But again, you have to have a sufficient level of the thin string that pulls everyone together, because it could be just one string that snaps that really just has a detrimental effect on others if there's a responsible corner. And that is like a carrot, a string that keeps everyone together. The incentives, don't be fucking stupid, because this is good for you to be smart about it. But also, it has to be flexible enough to go, like, if you break this, you're fucking out. Do you know what I mean? Like, without being accused of being tyrannical, you know what I mean?
But I mean, I think this could also work, because say there's some like five solar punk podcasts and they get some Lens sponsorship deal, like they can, as far as I'm concerned, they can organize that however they want, so long as they're not like violating the conditions that give them the tier 1 status in PodsDAO. Like if they just show the little slide, and then they can set up their own split. They can set up their own Moloch DAO to collectively come to decisions within those 5 without having to go through this big master Moloch of 200 other DAOs. And then if they mess up, then the big master Moloch DAO of the 200 podcasts can just remove them from the split, or something like that, or whatever policy we have. But yeah, I really think this can work with podcasts kind of having their own autonomy and their own ability to form other little sub networks and go about things independently. And we don't need to be micromanaging. It's not like the big DAO needs to be collectively micromanaging all this stuff. I think
it's too much. It's too much of a risk if we do, especially if it's content. Here's the good thing we said about markets the other day. Imagine you have one solar punk pillar that, they're aligned on maybe being a bit over the edge. Let's say, we're the more edgy, tiptoeing over the edge. It's not going to be solar punk folks that do that. But let's just pick a pillar of content pods that are streaming on the fucking edge, and they've made their deal with a company, our protocol. What could actually be really fucking smart if we can build it this way is we have the edge pillar, the more moderate pillar, and a slightly even more moderate pillar, if you like, a competitive market of content, and each of which maybe all have alliances with Lens. And so you have a situation where if this one, the really edgy pillar, steps well over the line, whatever it is, and puts Lens at risk, puts all of us at risk, the other two can go, hey, no. We also have a relationship with Lens. Shun those guys. And Lens can publicly go, no, they did step up. That pillar stepped over the line. We broke our relationship with them, but we're keeping our relationship with these 2 pillars and PodsDAO overall. And that's their cover. That's their safety valve. That's our safety valve. that's our anti-fragility and so forth. That's how markets in a way are good. The competitive, everyone keeps each other in line in a way that's good. And if you fuck up, we're here. Hey, we'll take your. Know what I mean? Like, so it all kind of works itself out in a way.
And I think that could work, whether it's pillars like you said, like other alliances, and it could also, like, if the sponsor's savvy enough, they should know this is a very modular arrangement, and if this one podcast fucks up, but I as the sponsor am still benefiting from these other 10 podcasts, I can just work something out with those other 10 podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. And they can say publicly to cover themselves, we're throwing that shitty podcast that fucked up to the wolves, and they can go hammer and tongs as much as they want on that. We don't even have to. We can kick them out. We can go hammer and tongs. But Lens can go hammer and tongs all they want and throw them to the wolves and cover themselves. So what we're thinking now in the minds of how does the protocols protect themselves, but it's because it protects us to think how they're going to protect themselves by engaging with us. Okay, good. I think we've tick.
Yeah. And I mean, and the splits thing, like I got the ENS domain. I can set up a split in the next couple days if I just get some wallet addresses for all the podcasts in the network already. And like the good thing about this is it's so easy to change. If one of the podcasts like loses access to that wallet, or we want to add a new one, we can just deploy another split. It'll be probably a couple bucks to do that. Even less if we do it on some other layer 2. But like that's super easy to do. Like we can get started on that very soon. I'm happy to do that.
Pronto? Why not? Why not is what I would say. Anyone else have any other comments on that? And what do you guys like for time?
I mean, I probably could stay on, but I probably should get off because I'm like yawning here, and I keep hearing my kid keeps waking up, so she might wake up soon. But
well, we're at the 2.5 hour mark anyway, so maybe it's good run number to stop on for now.
Yeah, well, just quickly to comment on Spencer's thing. Like I say, I could keep going because I'm enjoying the conversation, and there's lots of things to figure out. But yeah, it's 2.5 hours. So yeah, I like the idea. It's simple. You're right, Spencer. If we can, that's something we could do quick. So I mean, I don't see any reason to put it off right now. And yeah, I mean, it's just something simple and effective, potentially effective, that we could just set up. Like, why wouldn't we do that? Yeah, go on, Spencer.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Just
right.
But and also what we could do until we need a Moloch DAO, because that's a bit more complex, but still, like I've only deployed one Moloch DAO before. Like we could. That also is relatively easy, but like once we add that in addition to like having a Moloch DAO manage ENS, and like then it gets a bit more complicated. It's still doable. If we need an easier way to come to decisions, then like so we would just need like a list of wallet addresses for the split. Yeah, awesome. I'm very glad we have Mercurial here. We have the list of wallet addresses for the split. We could also use Joke Race just to whitelist that list of addresses to come to a quick decision. But also, I think in the near future we could have the Moloch as well.
Yeah, I mean, I just have a thing that maybe we could save for, like, I'm just gonna throw it out there, but maybe for next episode it might be a good, like, sort of 80% thing. I just kind of got thinking as we were talking about like sponsors and don't know, like the goals and the aims and the politics and all these kind of things. How do we when we start thinking about sort of the whole tier thing? Is there a top tier? Like, is there in some way that we try and facilitate? Like, how do we be the DAO that has some of the best podcasts? Like, how do we curate some of the best crypto podcasts the most influential, the most thought-provoking pods in the whole of crypto. That's like totally sort of different to sort of what we've been saying. Maybe like this, that would be like I don't know how we would incentivize or do that and be hands off and etc. But it just came to me like, I guess we've talked about like distribution and helping the little people. Is there a top level to it? Is there another thing we can do where we're like, I don't know, I think that'd be kind of cool, right? Like in a couple of years, we're kind of like, we're just that our brand is the brand, right? We've got all the sickest pods in the whole of crypto under our wing.
Yeah, I actually
Can I just clarify the question? That I don't have an answer, so I'm just gonna clarify. Are you saying that how do we define a top tier as on a monetary level? What's the upper ceiling? Are you saying, or are you saying, all right, we have tiers of like what you have to do, network effects / to get money, blah blah blah. But then we should have like the creme of the creme top tier, where
I mean, yeah,
content pods get paid like an exceptional amount. Can you define what you mean by that? Sorry.
No, I wasn't thinking about in terms of financial reward. Actually, it was more like
Okay.
the vision in my mind was kind of like, I don't know, like there's a couple of podcasts out there that are like really good and like sort of well produced as well, you know, and I was kind of thinking that, you know, like how there's like the Lex Friedmans and the Rogans and things. Imagine you, but like now we have sort of like I guess there's quite a few good crypto podcasts, but like for the one example we bring up is like the Banklesses, you know, that I think that was kind of the vision in my head. But that being said, yeah, maybe the tier 3, I don't know, maybe okay, maybe tier 3 is like, that's how you with some grant money or whatever, it's some money from the treasury.
Why do you only need 3 tiers? I mean, why not 10 tiers? Why not 1.2, 1.2, 1.5, 1.8? You can get as granular as you wish. I mean, even in fact, more granular tiers, not ridiculously granular tiers, but more granular tiers. If you're a podcaster looking to make your way through the ranks, you always want to feel that you're stepping up.
100%, yeah.
By creating only 3 tiers, that might create too much of a big leap to get into tier 2s. You're like,
yeah, good point.
fuck, I'm not progressing at all, am I? Jesus. Whereas if you constantly feel that you're always making your way up the stair and always getting a little bit more, then yeah, do you know what I mean? You're gonna be like, fuck, right, I'm keeping going at this.
We can do like the 9 degrees of Illuminati, but for PodsDAO.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. But like at the top, the head of the Illuminati.
At the top tier, everyone goes to lunch with us 3 and gets a
There you
fucking ham sandwich.
Yeah, to go into the top one, you need to like sacrifice your life savings into some burn address or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, all this stuff and what Mercurial says, the reputation-based curation. Maybe one mechanism here could be if there's some kind of prestigious tier, whether it's the top one or not. It could be something where once a month the community votes on one podcast to elevate up to that tier, just based on whatever criteria. And so that could create some kind of incentive to like prove to the other podcasts that there's a high production value, interesting content, stuff like that. And you could be that month's sort of graduate. Pod race.
Do you listen to
Star Wars?
I love that. That's a great idea. It could be almost like, yeah, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, on the reputation-based thing, and also the sort of like production value, it doesn't necessarily have to be production value or based on that, but I was kind of thinking like if you're in the tier 3, you're sort of funded with you get the Shure SMB7 or whatever. So like you got like the minimum viable podcast idea sort of goes up with the tiers as well. So like the minimum viable thing for tier 3 is a certain standard, but it's not just based on that. Like if you get in, you get that. But for example, I was wondering, Spencer, have you listened to the Blockchain Socialist? You know his podcast.
I've heard of it. I'm not sure if I've actually listened to an episode of his.
So his isn't like overly produced. It's not like, and he's not like got video, but he brings up a lot of like important ideas and a lot of interesting concepts, and is really like adding value to the crypto space because it's, you know, he's bringing it from like a something you'd appreciate. Like if you're not listening to it, it's all about like left-wing politics, and like he's also like a he's like fond of the Marxist intellectual tradition, and he's like one, I would say he's like pretty far, like he's pushing it. I don't know if there's more like, not, I don't want to say extreme because he's not like extreme, but in terms of like being about that life, if you know what I mean, he's like, that's what he's doing. He's the blockchain socialist. He's pretty cool. But yeah. So my point is, it doesn't have to be just, oh, your podcast's great and flashy and you had Michael Saylor on for 10 episodes, so it make you're automatically like a baller. It can, things like reputation can be based on how much like good, like how much ideation, how much like real thought-provoking stuff is that person put. Like, they're a top tier, man. They're like really making people think in the crypto space. And like, I would even say, you know what, for example, someone like, remember the whole SBF thing, and do you guys ever watch the Bankless SBF episode? They put that together.
I didn't know.
So this is just before it all fell, right? Before FTX all fell, they got him on and they grilled him, right? And they were like, "What the hell?" He was like giving these like, and I think they had Eric Voorhees as well as this other guy, and he was like debating him. So there was like the Bankless host, and then there was Eric Voorhees and Sam Bankman-Fried, and it was almost not like a prophecy, but like it was like that debate, that podcast episode. This is why I probably recommend you watch it, just to get an understanding of like the context. Like, that was quite a big part of it before all the Binance stuff, and the Binance, they got into a war with Binance, and then that's kind of, there's a bunch of drama that happened around it. But this was like, I don't want to say it was the like the first domino, but on like a, maybe like a more micro level, it was like a domino inside a domino game inside a domino game. It was, FTX was already like under the shit, but this Bankless episode just sort of exposed him. He couldn't really answer the questions, and he was like going round and round in circles, and he was like, yeah, well, this and that, and it was just like this vibe about it where it was like, who the fuck is this guy, man? What the fuck is he talking about, dude? This guy, no one's really put him to the fire before, and this Eric Voorhees and Bankless like hold him to the fire, and he's crumbling, man. Now he looks really shady. Like, this guy's exposing himself. So it was a really like pivotal. Like, they exposed Sam Bankman-Fried before the whole thing went down. If you watch that episode, they made him so uncomfortable that he was just like, he looked bad, and then it was like, holy shit, this is the biggest exchange run by this guy. Like, can't even answer the fucking questions. So it was that, sort of like a good piece of journalism in a sense, ahead of its time.
Bring it all together a little bit here.
Anyway, the point.
Like, what is the point? What's the top?
The point is even if that because of what they did, if that podcast was dog shit and recorded on a fucking $20 iPhone, that's like quality. That's adding value to the space. So it's not just based on how many followers or whatever, how many have they got. There has to be some kind of fluidity to it, right. And it's not just some fucking machine-like thing where we don't have subjectivity, you know what I mean, a subjective interpretation of like,
I got confused.
They really did something. They helped people. They moved the space forward. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm talking about.
So let me clarify the question, because I'm still a bit confused. So I can imagine the audience maybe is, because I think your examples threw me. I thought I got your point, and I do now, but your examples threw me, because I think you're talking about how do we create a dynamic where no matter how big you are as an individual pod, no matter what mic you have, you might naturally, in terms of our the way we judge how you could go through the pillars, like, you may just be making fire content that really is relevant and hits, and you might be naturally just down at the bottom of the pillar or the bottom of the tier, and we should find some way to really promote and highlight the stunningly good journalistic work you're doing. Is that your point? Okay, your point. You threw me with the TBS because he's the front runner in the game, and Bankless is the front runner in its game. So you kind of threw me by picking those examples. I was like, wouldn't you, to make your point, pick a couple of the lowliest unknown podcasts in the world and how they made a difference? But I get you now. But that is your point, how we can somehow at some stage dip down and pick from the lower tiers, if you like, and go, hey.
I mean, they could already be higher tier if it's. I don't exactly know how we're judging it. It was just kind of throwing the idea out there. It could already be great. You know what I mean? Like they could, just because they're already balling doesn't mean we can't appreciate the journalism or whatever it is. The doc, maybe they make a documentary and we're like, you know what, you're a podcaster by trade or whatever, but you dipped into the documentary thing. You know what? We appreciate that. We're gonna highlight that. That's a sick documentary, dude. It's other form of art. You know, that kind of. I don't know where it goes, but yeah.
But I suppose, like, for me, like, this is the natural path of PodsDAO. I mean, that is the end goal, is to be having podcasters all who are not. We don't want in fucking 10 years time to still have the pods that 10 years ago were a tier 1, only a tier 2. Surely you want to judge our success by, in 2 years time, the ones are now at 3 or 4 or whatever, and that's the route to success. You're not like pummeling money in the middle and doing great yourself at number 2. Like you're influential, and the model is built. The network effects, if you're moving through the tiers, it will mean that you're more influential, because influential brings in content, eyeballs on content, more views, and so you make your way up that way. It's built to reward influence, right? It's not built to reward something else. So isn't that the only judge of success here? And of course there will be a ton of people who are like super influential in the space. If there's not, we haven't built the right model. In fact, we completely failed at the model, surely. Or have I completely missed something? And then if they're doing other documentaries, that's something that PodsDAO, as their PodsDAO members, will share, and it's still content that they're creating as DAO members. It all works the same way. There'll still be the network effects. It'll still be part of the ecosystem. Surely, no?
I think part of this that I'm starting to think about is that, like, we can have these kind of linear, like, quantitative track up, or ladder to climb, but there could also be like this whole other dimension of qualitative stuff. Like maybe there's just a special pool of journalistically critical podcasts or something like that, and that can be some subset of the podcasts. There can be a special ENS subdomain split for a handful of like that dozen curated podcasts there, and that those can all co-promote each other. And there can be ways of highlighting and curating groups of podcasts that way, as like whether it's by theme or by certain kind of achievement or a certain quality or whatever it is, like that can plug into this tiered thing. It can be I think that,
I mean, we could vote on that, right? Let's say there's an important thing, like say like the Ukraine and the Russia thing, for example. Let's say everyone, like the main, like the consensus in the across the DAOs really was like that we want to fund some kind of pool that's involved in journalism, because that's an important part of this event, and so the sort of overarching DAO can then, like, we can sort of we can weight it, we can allocate the distribution different, like, so using the sort of like the split idea, we can choose to weight the split based, I guess. This then gets into like DAO. I don't know what we support and that kind of thing. Are we supporting certain things at certain points in time? Does that make sense? Like, because you were talking about the pools, and then is it the job of the main DAO to kind of go, okay, we're all going to vote this month on what we think so and so, this journal pool gets 20% because that's important right now, and that we think that's important for the world, and does that make sense?
You could have an opt-in model. You can't really force people to vote. You can't really force people to contribute, because I think that again leads to the fragility, not the anti-fragility. Breaks the whole system. But you can have a vote. Here's a pool of different things, like different journalism projects that our pods have done. Well, if you want to take part in the vote for whoever you want, and the winner wins, based on money, based on not money, based on votes, whatever. Like, just leave it up to how it works in the real world. Opt in to vote for the movie that you want to win the Oscars. Vote for it. Do you know what I mean? Another one, and the winner wins. Even sponsors, I guess, could come in and sponsor a journalistic project or an award ceremony or a specific whatever, and then you could have different payment rails and different horizontals, but nobody should be forced. Everyone should opt in or opt out, and of course they can take part in the tiers if they this is the thing about the tiered thing, the network effects. It's only going to be successful if you want to go through the tiers, right? If you're not liking stuff, blogging stuff, making content and sharing the network, and you're quite content to be at level 1.5 and just do your little fucking thing out in Lebanon, and that has its own influence, and you're quite happy with that, nobody should in PodsDAO should be going, fuck you down there, you're not doing enough. No, like, do you know what I mean? Like, it should be resilient enough that there will be enough people who want to boom, 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 and are prepared to do more stuff to get there. And other people might be content at 1.5, and Lebanese journalist wants to bounce over and just focus on a long form documentary that will have its own sponsorship, and will have, instead of 1,000 retweets to get to level 2, over here, the fucking Lebanese documentary hits so hard at once that's such network effects for everyone alone that brings its own fucking rewards and contributions. Why not both? Why not the possibility of different ways for people to make it which way they fucking want, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that, and also something about like whether or not the whole PodsDAO group should officially recognize some pool or some subset of journalist podcasts. I think part of that is like if 7 journalism related podcasts want to go off and do their own thing, no one's going to stop them. But if they want like a PodsDAO like in kind of label, and if the main Moloch DAO has the PodsDAO.eth ENS, then the PodsDAO, the main master Moloch, would need to vote to create a subdomain like journalism.podsdao.eth and put that on a split. And I think like that doing so would require some kind of a main DAO proposal, and we can set up quorum and stuff so that it's easy and we're not like forcing people to vote. I think it's important not to get hung up too much on quorums. But I think that again, kind of do it both ways. I don't know what my time.
Yeah, I think maybe we can bounce. And my only clarification question is do you mean if there's a specific cool journalism project over here, and they're like, we need funding from PodsDAO, or we want a vote from the PodsDAO members to give us the go ahead to make it, because it may be so big that all the anti-fragile stuff about, hey, you guys made something over there, you know, it doesn't necessarily reflect on, you know, if this is so big and hits so big, then that almost is a PodsDAO. You know, how do you then, you know, because you could pick any issue of the day, and you could find that 60% of the DAO votes for it, and 40% are completely alienated by it. But the project hits so hard that it does represent the 40%, whether they like it or not, and then that's tyranny. So how can you build smart contracts, code, voting systems where that can permit to happen, but again in a decentralized, anti-fragile way? It gets super complicated when you have the likes of the PodsDAO logo, this again, the overall collective. How do you get that balance right for those massive projects that will represent everyone, like it or not? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, and maybe there will be edge cases that it seems like what you're describing theoretically would be like grounds for some kind of a fork or a schism or something. I mean, I generally think we can encourage podcasts to kind of do what they want, so long as it's not really malicious or evil. But if they want some official PodsDAO recognition of it, then they're just going to have to commit the majority of people who are voting on it to
right.
be in favor of it, you know.
I see. Okay, so if there is something where PodsDAO everyone could be impacted, then they need to be careful, and they need to make sure they're getting like 80% of the pluralistic vote or something.
Yeah, or whatever the majority. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I see. Okay.
And that would be like if some 10 journalism podcasts wanted to get the journalism.podsdao.eth subdomain pointed at them, and that's sort of like a representation of PodsDAO, especially endorsing this. Then those 10 people would need to essentially lobby the rest of PodsDAO to approve this proposal. And if it doesn't get approved, they can still work together and still promote each other's podcasts. They just wouldn't be able to do so with that label. You know?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, it's a good balance. Cool. All right. What do you think? Coming up 250. Should we call it a night, or is there any other? Is there any other big moments anyone wants to say? Any last comments, maybe? We'll leave it there, or what?
Yeah, I mean, last comments. Just looking at splits and some of the contracts, and just because it relates to what we're talking about, there's just reading about this swapper contract. So it's a swapper is a payable smart contract that swaps all tokens received into the output token and forwards onto the beneficiary. So essentially, you can enter like a contract address, or the token address, and the funds will be swapped into this token. That's interesting. No, just thinking about in relation to the sort of like thing I mentioned about privacy, like if you wanted to, or even just, I guess it's up to, you could get too technical with this. You could say one way you could do it is just it's like ETH, and it's up to them what they do with it. Then they have to swap into their thing. Or if you wanted to facilitate or provide a way to do it, there are like this swapper looks like it would, maybe not do it all like autonomously, but it could help. Like just if someone wanted to get paid in a certain thing for whatever reason, right? Some people like Polygon, right? Some people want some Matic. Some people want some Sol. I don't know. There might be many reasons that you'd want to be paid in this thing. Sometimes to like cash out, right? Just for example, this is a bad example because it's pretty unlikely, but maybe not every exchange accepts raw ETH, you know what I mean? And so they can't off ramp and then cash into like dollars or whatever and actually use it because maybe you live in a place where there's not a bunch of crypto infrastructure. But yeah, again, maybe the burden for that is on them to find their way out. Do we help facilitate that in whatever way, even if that's just knowledge, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be, we do some smart contract that swaps it into fucking Solana tokens for them, you know. Does that make sense? Like obviously there are ways like the like you can pay people in crypto, but I guess what part do we play in?
My instinct would be like if we've done this right, those kind of solutions should be peer to peer. There should be sufficient numbers of peer to peer people coming forward going, look, I'll help you get that in place, rather than a core team going, we'll do that for you, or we'll make sure. I mean, because then we're opening ourselves up to too much risk. But why not peer to peer? Can't that be done peer to peer?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we can. I was just thinking. I don't know. I don't know. Just back to my point about the privacy thing. If there's ways to facilitate the sort of private distribution of some of the funds, that would be probably a benefit to some people.
What's the? I guess I'm not really seeing why that is not just a really simple solution. Isn't there people out there with the knowledge and the ability to set up those rails without controversy, without difficulty, with ease? What's the challenge there? Maybe I don't see it yet, but your question is, shouldn't we set up privacy rails for folks? The answer is
not even necessarily privacy. It's not just privacy. No, not just necessarily privacy. That's why I would say, like, bringing up the example of like let's say if someone just wanted to be paid in a different token, that could be because it's a privacy token. It could be not for that reason at all. So I was just saying, like, is there some facilitation there? I guess Spencer, what like, how does this split thing, like, how does this work? How are people? Is it just ETH just distributed?
Let's see here.
Because obviously you've got to think about like gas fees and things as well. There's all that. So the distribution mechanism in some ways does matter, and like how are the tokens paid? What's going on in the background?
It says it's a payable smart contract that splits all incoming ETH and ERC20 tokens among the recipients. I tend to think that that like we should. identify whatever I'm thinking probably ETH. Maybe some stable coin should be like the default thing people get payments in, and then they can opt into something else. But I'm just not sure if that adds more administrative overhead and central choke points, like managing those things and those swaps, or if we should just put the onus on the individual to swap to something that they want when they get ETH or stable coins or something.
Well, it does say here that it's deployed on, it's multi-chain deployed on Ethereum, Polygon, Optimism, Arbitrum, and more. So that's cool. That gets some way to, you know what I mean, to kind of what I was talking about. It was just, yeah, there may be other chains that people want to use. I guess is what I was saying. There's like just for like, it's expensive to fucking move your funds around on ETH. You know what I mean? Like. And sometimes it's not, and sometimes it is, and like, you know, a way to kind of like get around that is, you know, you go on either layer twos or you know, you go through Solana or whatever it is, you know. So that was what I'm thinking.
Oh yeah, and I think one solution that could be relatively easy here is just to, like at least to start, just pick a layer 2 that's the most adopted, just to get around the gas fees thing, because I think that's probably the biggest issue with using mainnet for something like this. But just hypothetically, we can pick Polygon, and then we can use that. Like we could theoretically have a split for all these different chains, so that if someone wanted to donate to the whole PodsDAO UBI thing on Optimism, they could do it on Optimism, they could do it on Polygon. That I think would involve deploying a new split for every single chain every time we add someone to the split, unless there's some more sophisticated solution that the split has, like lets you manage like federated splits or something. But yeah, I would say at least to start, just in the interest of simplicity, like if we wanted to start iterating on this now, I would say we can start on Polygon. We can get the addresses of the podcasts in the network so far on Polygon or on some layer 2. We can start that.
I mean, I'm not mad at Polygon. I feel like because of I mean, my experience with Polygon has been pretty good. They're pretty reliable. I don't have much experience with Optimism or Arbitrum. I hear a lot of good stuff about them, though. Like a lot of good stuff. A lot of people like them. But it seems like Polygon, in some ways, is maybe, I don't know if you could say like closer to ETH. Maybe the onboarding's a little bit easier, or it's just been around it's definitely been around for a little bit longer than Optimism and Arbitrum, or at least the stage that it's at, and the stage of growth and how many people are using it.
Guys, I'm gonna drop out if you guys want to talk about this.
We can
much more. It probably can be taken offline, but I mean, feel free to stay. I'm gonna bounce because it's late on for me, or it's early in the morning for me. So what you guys want to stay and?
I'm happy to continue this async too, because I think
yeah.
something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're coming up to 3 hours, so yeah, we need to go.
Cool. Well, that was it. If you're still listening on the audio, that was PodsDAO Pod. Thanks for listening. I hope you got a lot of good stuff out of that. We had fun. Lots of great conversations, lots of good solutions. We'll do this again next week with a lot more problems to solve. And yeah, join us on the PodsDAO journey. Thanks to Brother Mercurial in the chat. A lot of good stuff. And yeah, see you soon. Cheers, folks.
Peace.
Peace.